All right, everyone, good evening. I'd like to call this regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Finance to order for Monday, October 19th, 2020. Item number 1, public forum. Anybody wishing to address the Board of Finance in public forum? And I don't see anybody in the waiting room, so, okay. We'll move on to item number 2, approve minutes of the regular meeting of September 21st, 2020. Do I hear a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Your second?
Second.
Awesome. Comments or edits? I had a couple of items, very small, I believe. On page number 2, third paragraph right in the center of it, where the sentence says, he added that whenever you put in a penalty, there is also an expectation instead of and. Next paragraph, there was discussion about the boiler piping issue at Baldwin and why it was not discovered. So just adding not there. And on page number 5, third sentence, third paragraph, I guess, Mr. Ailes asked if the Board of Education was still meeting weekly. And that's all I have. Anybody else?
You know, Mike, on page 4, underneath medical benefits, somewhere in the center,
Yep.
It says, Ms. Malavasi said August is definitely from July claims. I think there might be a word missing. I was actually trying to figure out by rereading the notes what was going on last month.
Might be more of a clarification. I remember that July was a low month and August was a high month.
High month, yeah.
And so I think we were just commenting that August is definitely a catch up from the July claims. Maybe we say something like that just to clarify it.
Okay, I just thought maybe a word.
The August higher amount is holdover from the July claims.
Or that August includes the catch up of July claims.
Sure, that's fine. Thanks, Jonathan. Anything else on those? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? And abstain.
Yeah, I need to abstain.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Item number 3, correspondence. 1, standing building committee minutes. We have 2 sets of standing building committee minutes. Just so you all know, I a little bit last minute, I thank Cliff Gurnham for joining us. As I was reading through some of the standing building committee minutes from September and October, I felt it would be prudent to have either Cliff or the chair of the standing building committee present in case there were any questions, as there were a few things that did come up. So with that, Cliff, thank you for joining and helping us maybe answer any questions that might come up. With that, I'm just going to hand it over to the board. If there's any, we'll start with the September meeting minutes. And if anybody has any questions on the September standing building.
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead, Ken.
Going back to the September 21st minutes, which I don't see in here, I don't think. I think you had the September 8th, but not September 21st. Oh, it was from the meeting of August 4th on the Sightlines report. And that, I don't think that seems to have dropped off the agenda there and the reports from standing building, because it was reported at the August 4th, their August 4th meeting, that they would provide the school facilities needs assessment, and they would have it at some day in the future. And now that's 2 months down the road, and I'm wondering where that is.
Yeah, and I can answer your question. That's in my hands. We are developing the final report. We brought the preliminary report to the Standing Building Committee, and with the opening of school and all the COVID stuff going on, we kind of placed it on the back burner, but I hope to get back to it the end of this month, beginning of November, and get that final report out so that we can have a meeting and give that presentation to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and the Standing Building Committee.
While I got you there, I got a couple of comments on the September 8th meeting.
Yep, okay.
They proceed, all dealing with the turf field and track. As I saw a number down there, an estimate of between 1.78 billion and 2.06 billion, and wondered where that was, because in the minutes they're saying something about getting a bonding report pushing to November. They can't possibly mean this November, can they?
That was the original thought, to see if we can get a bond incorporated into this November, back in that early September. However, as it came out, we were too delayed in getting the information to the Board of Selectmen and to the Board of Finance, so we missed that window. But we are still moving forward with putting the bid package together and bidding it out, hopefully after the beginning of the first of the year. So presently, that project is being reviewed by the Board of Ed, and the different turfs have been presented to the Board of Ed, and they're evaluating those. So we hope to, at the next meeting, have a final recommendation from the athletic director, the standing fields, and give enough information and presentation to the Board of Ed that they can make a recommendation moving forward with the types of turf that they want to bid on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, just real quick while we're on that, is the intention, I know that the different types of infill are very different. So I don't think it's as easy as saying, well, we want this type of infill, so just go with that. I mean, there's other things that have to go with the drainage, and so it's not so easy to say an alternate package would be go with a certain type of infill, because that would ultimately relate to the rest of the design of the field. I did read that the Board of Education wanted to look a little more into the Brock fill, seeing that it seemed to be more cost effective, or one of the lower costs. Has there been any movement on that by chance, in terms of what, or is it the next Board of Ed meeting?
The Board of Ed's really waiting for the recommendation from the athletic director and the Standing Fields Committee.
Okay.
The athletic director, Standing Fields Committee, and the park director, Rick Maynard, all went out on Friday, I believe, to look at the Brock field and take a look at that style turf, along with a couple other stops along the way to look at different types of infill, so that they can provide information back to the Board of Ed so they can make a final decision.
Mhm.
However, I would not be surprised if we end up bidding out 2 to 3 different types of material. And from the discussion we've had with the engineer, the base and the various designs are relatively similar between all of them. So there's not a major change if we go
Oh, there isn't.
and bid all 3 types. Yep.
Okay.
But we wanted to see if we could rule out possibly one by looking at those fields.
One last question, just regarding that field. It seems that the amount is much more than what we had anticipated in whether it's capital or, however we decided that we were going to finance that, whether it was bonding or, pulling out of our budget, or so I think we were looking at like $1 million, weren't we originally? Like, I know there was discussion about Board of Ed in the town
It
splitting
wasn't 2
it
million.
$500,000 a piece. That was, from like a year ago, maybe even more. And now we're looking at numbers that are closer to 2 million.
Yep.
Matt,
And
I was
it's
gonna say,
pretty
Matt
simple.
or Cliff, any thoughts on the money for that? And I guess it would be a bond issue at this point.
Correct. So the reason the price has been driven up or is higher than expected was it made sense to go from just doing the turf field to incorporating the track and the surrounding areas, such as the D zones in the track, and really do the whole complex as one. versus doing either the track or doing the field, and then coming back and doing the second piece. So we incorporated the whole track and field and surrounding areas such as the D zones and things of that nature into the whole project to create a complete project. So if we can go to bond for the entire project, it just made sense to do it all at once.
For the record, how old is the stadium field? The turf and the track and all the work that was done. When was the last time work was done to that? Was that 15, 16 years ago?
Yes, it's well past its life cycle. Our track has been recoated at least once or twice, possibly 3 times in its life cycle. So the cracks that you see on the actual track are actually coming through the base because the base is cracked. So it's time not just to take down the track, but go down to the base, redo the base, and work your whole way up. Same with the field. We know that there's nothing left, really, especially with the main playing areas on the main field, such as the center area where they have all the face-offs and everything else. We actually had to cut that section out because it was so worn, it wasn't going to meet impact requirements and testing requirements. So we had to cut that out and redo that section of the field. So it really shows you that both the turf field and the track are at the very end of their life cycle. So we do not, my recommendation is you really do not want to push this off another year. It really should be done the summer of 2021.
Okay.
Cliff, before we were in pandemic world, how often would you say the stadium field was being used, either by the school or by members of the public coming and using it?
They use it pretty much from the spring all the way to the fall, every weekend with their various activities. You have the public that uses the track on top of that with walking, and it's a highly used field, very aggressively used and well booked throughout the summer with both youth sports, high school sports, and then other activities. So I think you've gotten your life cycle out of it. It really has provided substantial amount of use compared to say a natural grass turf or something of that nature.
I could probably take that one little step further, is that for 9 months of the year, it's pretty much a full-time use, as long as there's daylight, and then you even add nighttime. The 3 months that usually you get the least bit of use are December, January, and February, and the public comes out if the weather's nice. That place is, the people are on the turf. If it's a nice December day, you'll see lacrosse players out there, soccer. You'll have pickup football games. I mean, I've seen that numerous times. Based on my children, they were playing there, and even my friends who've gone out there and they'll play a pickup game of football or something like that. Even at my age, it happens. But go ahead, Amy.
I was just going to add, in terms of the board talking about the fill for the field, I think there were several board members, probably the ones that either were at the meeting or were part of the process several years ago, that had concerns about the fill type. When we did this last time, Brock fill wasn't a thing. And so we had the choice between the sand, the normal rubber, and then this coated rubber. And then there was some other thing. It was, I don't know, it was some kind of natural product. And we had a pretty well attended public meeting where there were some parents who really only were going to accept a grass field. So we really wanted to know more about this Brock fill because the coated, or this acrylic coated rubber was on the table last time around, and we didn't go with that. And there really hasn't been a ton of data that's come out since then, but we really want to know about this Brock fill because, I mean, at least in my opinion, it's always better to be ahead of things than behind things when it comes to safety. So we're curious to find out more about it.
Good. As you should. Appreciate it. Definitely got to look at all the options now, especially if they're newer. But I know there's a lot of fields that are using Brock fill now because it's fairly new. So, but there's no longevity test, to really know how it's performing. So, okay. Anything else on September meeting minutes? Anything else?
Mike, I've got some questions about Section 7, the performance contracting.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
It'd be if we could just get some clarification. I'm wondering if I actually understand it right. It seems like ECG came up with their report and they said that town of Guilford is owed $634,326. I assume that Johnson Controls owes us that, or? And then it goes on to say that he noted that only a total of 500,000 of this amount is a utility assessments to be provided, which are now in process. I'm not sure I understand that. And then it goes on to say that they would only be able to provide $134,326 at this time. Am I understanding this at all right? I'm asking if we can decode this a little.
So based upon the,
Oh, Cliff. Okay, go ahead,
Yeah.
Cliff.
based upon the energy performance contract, the original estimated amount coming from the utility incentives was 500,000. We have not received the 500,000 from the utilities, both Eversource or UI at this point. So therefore, JCI would still be on the hook because they're guaranteeing those utility incentives. So we do know that those incentives are coming. As a matter of fact, Eversource was out today confirming all the work was properly done. So we should see the Eversource incentives coming in probably in the next month or so. And UI, which covers utilities like heating, for example, or gas, those have already started to come in. So we received some incentives. So the amount we're kind of owed from Johnson Controls is not truly 100 or 600 and some odd thousand. If you take out the incentives, it's 100 and some odd thousand. They were short that first year, if that makes more sense. So,
all right, let me just rephrase it to see if I'm getting it. So we expected some money back just as incentives for the switch over to more efficient equipment. And that's a $500,000 amount. And then we expected a certain amount from savings from the utilities, savings in energy costs. Is that the balance, the 136,326?
correct. That they were short that amount, yes, from the energy savings. Correct.
Okay, so JCI is backing up what energy savings we should have expected, and we're falling short. So they're up that shortfall, but they don't want to pay the incentives, which they're on the hook for because they think they're forthcoming.
Correct.
From the
We know they
utility
are.
companies.
Yes. Correct.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to get to square one. I didn't really think I understood that when I read it, and now I got a grasp on it. So it sounds like we've got the engineering report, and we're starting to define what JCI owes us, and we're starting to pull in that money.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Great.
Just,
That's pretty good.
Mr. Chairman, this is Matt. I just want to reiterate, Jonathan, your understanding now is absolutely correct. That was first year savings anticipated, and they were based on a combination of energy savings as well as the incentives. UI has paid their incentives in full. Mary Jane, nod your head if I'm correct. And we are still waiting on the Eversource ones. So again, one of the things that you should know is we're getting tremendous value out of the relationship we have with ECG. They were our owner's rep or consultant, energy consultant that we engaged to help us through this process. And they are the ones who have been bird dogging the credits, as well as providing us with the appropriate documentation for us to issue the appropriate letters from our council relative to what JCI owns us. So thrilled with the work that ECG has been doing, which is now what, almost 3 years after we started this project.
All right, maybe two follow-up questions then. If I remember, we have a limited engagement with ECG paid up front. Will we maybe continue then to have them do measurement and verification, further for further years going out?
They will do it through the balance of the contract till JCI provides us with the contract deliverables. It's through the execution of the contract deliverables. At this point, Cliff, I don't know whether we need to engage ECG beyond the first couple of years to ensure that we have the savings that we're guaranteed in those first couple of years, as well as, remember something too, that contract gets extended a little bit because we didn't complete a number of the measures until such time as we still have a couple of measures that we're working on, right, Cliff?
Correct. Yeah, we're still working on one solar project up at Melissa Jones, and they're completing some boiler work at Baldwin, along with some control work at Baldwin.
All right, another follow-up question. How does this impact our surplus for the prior years? How will we account for this windfall?
Mary Jane, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Jonathan and the board. So one of the items that I was going to discuss when we talked about revenue was the significant revenue that's shown in the selectmen's line item. That $285,000 is actually rebates that we receive through the energy performance contract, and we need to determine how we'll be sharing that with the Board of Education and where we'll be transferring that money to.
Does that count as for this year or last year? Sorry, Matt. I'm just curious which year it comes in.
It's in the current fiscal year.
Okay.
And just as a quick aside, Amy, we've had some discussions that the credits are going to go back out in proportion to the facilities for which we receive those credits, and you can imagine that most of those credits are going to be going to the Board of Education. As some of you may recall, who are on the board at the time, I think it's basically an 80-20 split in terms of the measures as well as the anticipated savings. So any of the rebates should go back to the appropriate entity. If we're not doing a 50-50 split, it will go, because they can track those credits to the facility that generate those credits.
Okay.
Seems like that money is tied to the previous year, though, and it's a surplus in budget from the previous year. I mean, we're late to collect it, obviously, but it's associated with our first year of the performance contract, right?
Yeah, but there are some rules around municipal receivables. Mary Jane, you want to start with a little primer on how we record revenues?
Well, that money did come in this fiscal year based on reports from this fiscal year. It was not necessarily receivable from last year because we weren't we did not know what those numbers were supposed to be. So they will go into the general fund as of fiscal year 21.
Mr. Chairman, that's interesting. How much surprise is there in these numbers? I thought these were pretty much expected or budgeted in, or how much wiggle room, or see what I mean? It's we don't turn around and get surprised by the amount, do we? I know I'm not asking the question terribly clearly, but I figured that when the contracts were sorted out, we kind of knew on a rolling basis what to expect. I guess not.
We did, but because of the nature of that project, where we could not couldn't guarantee that all those measures were going to be completed in the same year, we did not record or account for those revenues, those anticipated revenues, until such time as the project was completed, and that's why we're starting to address it at this point.
All right, so it's a cash accounting basis. It's fine with me. I'm just curious how how it all pans out.
Yeah, I think if things were paced, things were completed and paced better, or according to what the schedule was, it would be a different number. But it seems like there was some catch up that happened. So, a number of things came together at the same time, which basically hit a bigger number. That's what it sounds like what happened, because it was supposed to be fairly consistent over a period of time.
And let's not forget that your board has the opportunity to move that money where they see fit. Mary Jane will be making a recommendation relative to how we apply it and so forth. That would be the Board of Finance's the ultimate decision on what you do with that money. And to Jonathan's point, yes, you could put it into unassigned fund balance.
Okay. Seeing that we're still on standing building, anything for the October minutes?
I just have a small, it's just admin really, but
Sure, go ahead, Bob.
I brought this up a little while ago, and it's just something that bothers the OCD in me. Item 4, there's always on their agenda, there's no report from the Board of Finance. And I know that, Mike, you used to attend.
Yep.
And if it's not a formal arrangement, I'd ask that probably be removed from the agenda, just so it doesn't look like there's an intentional lack of engagement or unintentional lack of engagement. Or better, that we either assume we appoint liaison personnel to certain committees in town or invite them. I'm very happy to see Cliff here tonight, for example. Is already his explanations have been, very, very, very valuable. So perhaps we could invite people to join us.
Yeah, to go to that point, Bob, number one, I agree. I think that particular line item is a bit misleading and should be removed. But number two, I do believe there should be some representation from the Standing Building Committee, at least in some sort of correspondence. I will admit that after I read all of the Standing Building Committee minutes over the last couple of days, and I thought there were going to be some questions tonight about a number of issues. I reached out to the chairman and I reached out to Cliff, and I actually copied in Linda just as an FYI this morning to join us. Maybe it was even late morning, so it was unfortunately it was late notice. I do believe, Cliff, if you could, I did try to get a hold of David DeMeo, but again, he could have been away today on the road. So I appreciate you joining, but if you could pass back to the committee, taking off the Board of Finance report, I could try to have a conversation with David too, try to get a hold of him. Just indicate that we take that agenda item off and we try to have somebody represent as we had intended to actually like 2 years ago.
About 3 months ago.
Well, yeah, what I was going to say is that in February or March, we were going to have a liaison. I had a conversation with David and they were going to be present. And then also we went to the Zoom meetings and we weren't meeting in person anymore. And I think that kind of threw everybody for a bit of a loop. Now, as Bob, I think you even said it last month, now it should be easier just to call in and just, hey, have a representative on. So Cliff, if you could pass that on, and I will do the same and have a conversation with David. So we're coming from both angles.
Yeah, I will pass that along, Mike. I think they're confused on how to become part of your meetings and stuff. They talk about trying to join them, and then if you could just, reach out to David, it might make it easier for them to join if they have a better understanding of how it's going to happen.
Yeah, and as opposed to the pension committee, which we get, Bob is still very involved in, at least on an understanding level of the pension committee. I'm a much more removed from the Standing Building Committee than I was, even just a couple of years ago. So, I can't answer the questions like I used to be able to for the board. So as much as I'd like to, I don't like to assume what the answers might be. That would be wrong. So I appreciate that. I'll get a hold of David. Anything else on Standing Building before we move on?
Yeah, on the October.
October, October.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. If you'll notice, there's a continuation of item 5 on the agenda.
Yep.
About the Cox and Guilford Lakes HVAC. And I was looking at the continuation of that, which is sitting under item number 9.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a proposal for Guilford Lakes project and Cox working on the boilers that adds up to, between the two buildings, adds up to about $100,000. And there's a reference by Mr. Gurnham, I'm glad he's here, that both schools are on their last year of life. Do you mean last years of life or last year of life? Do we have, if the kids are back in there, is there a possibility that these boilers will go in both schools this year or next year? How urgent is it, in other words?
Again, this is probably their last season of reliability. They're starting to leak. So we should be able to make it through this winter by patching and doing what we need to do to keep them online. However, again, my recommendation would be replace all 4 boilers, 2 in each school, along with and incorporating those into the HVAC projects to make sure that they all get done at the same time.
Mr. Gurnham, I remember a few years ago, I remember quite an account you gave of the Jones boiler, and it was going to fall into, you were very much in favor of Johnson Controls because that new boiler would come under their purview. And these quotes aren't from Johnson Controls. Am I missing something? Should these have been under that original proposal, or?
Again, the original proposal, because that was done now either 5 or 6 years ago, the expected life cycle at that point in time was another 5 or 6 years. So it didn't fall underneath the JCI proposal. So we were able to get those additional years and hold off on replacement. So and we try to make them last as long as we can before we have to replace stuff.
It just shows the passage of time since we got started that JCI thing. It's longer ago than I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Thank
Anything
you.
else on October? Okay. Again, Mr. Gurnham, thank you for joining us. Stick around for as long as you'd like to.
You're welcome.
You're
Have a great
you're
night.
always welcome.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to pension committee minutes and the investment report. Any comments, questions on pension?
Is there any way to give employees incentive to take the monthly payouts or annual payouts instead of the lump sum?
I'll let Mary Jane or I'll let someone else answer it. But my recollection of that is that that is being written out of contracts, is it not?
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
Linda can probably answer it better than I.
Okay.
But
Whoever.
it is in contracts at the moment, and we have had significant discussions at the pension committee meeting regarding the effect of the lump sums. I don't know, Linda, what you'd like to say about it?
Well, so for the Board of Ed, it's 4 different contracts that we would have to negotiate that out. And since this is a closed pension plan, I don't know if that is going to be something that we're going to easily be able to negotiate out, and it would take us a couple of years based on when the contracts currently expire. We thought that we could change the calculation formula and lessen the impact of what a lump sum is. That also seems like it would have to be a negotiated item. So it's something that we're looking at and talking about, but it's not something that's going to change quickly because it is all in 4 different individual contracts.
This is something I believe we did talk about this a little bit last month as well, right, Bob?
Yes.
You brought up some issues with that, and
We did indeed. You know, we
Yes.
should have seen this coming. Well, we did see this coming, but we didn't understand it, and some didn't understand it. So it's a little catch-up ball now. And I defer to Linda about the difficulty of changing contracts to anticipate this. I think we need to get our arms around, or at least pension or somebody's got to get their arms around what the bottom line becomes and the knock-on effect to the fund the pension fund as a whole. So I understand that each of these 4 contracts has their own bucket. We don't manage the money as a town in individual buckets. We've got one big portfolio that gets managed, and each has their claim on their portion. So I don't want to take it any farther than that right now, but at some point, the rubber's going to meet the road here in one fashion or another.
Just for my understanding, when people take a lump sum, we don't buy out an annuity, right? We just take on the liability of the annual the lifetime pension payment, or whatever the payout is actually. Does anybody know?
I had trouble hearing all of that, Jonathan, but it comes strictly out of the pension, right out of the balance in the pension. We do not take out any additional annuities or anything such like that. I'm not sure I heard all your question, but
Okay.
hopefully that answers
No,
part of
that
it.
was the question.
I think
Yeah.
I think the realities of collective bargaining suggest that the Board of Ed will probably be working to take out the lump sum option as they go forward. The problem, as Linda just stated, is that is not a benefit that is currently extended to new hires, if I'm not mistaken. It is only to those that are already in place. So regardless of one's thinking on this, you're gonna have to pay something to get that taken out of those contracts. Not sure what that is actually gonna be. And as Linda stated, revising the payout formula is also something that needs to be negotiated. And I'll remind folks that most of the folks who negotiate on behalf of these unions happen to be the senior folks in those particular unions. And those are the ones that would most likely be dramatically affected by it. So very difficult treading, but nonetheless, that doesn't mean it isn't worth trying to do it in the upcoming negotiations.
Are all new employees at this point going on to the DCP plan?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think I remember a day in school, in college, when I took finance, the bird in hand is better than two in the bush. So maybe people want that lump sum payment.
As long as
Thank you.
you have a good financial advisor to manage it for you.
Well, part of the problem is right now, the difference between the monthly lifetime payout and what the calculation is for a lump sum payment is very different. So the lump sum payment is much higher. So it's much more attractive to take the lump sum than it is to take the monthly payout, which is why one of the things we're going to be discussing is, can we change that calculation of the lump sum to bring it closer in line to what the actual funding level is for each individual employee? Because right now we're paying out a lot more than what is calculated for the funding level for the employee's contribution by the board. If that makes any sense to.
What have we, I suppose we have we quantified the, I know the staff at the last time we met, that it was determined that half the staff are eligible for this. Have we figured out the downside in terms of numbers, or how many, what the head count is?
I think we still have 90 active member or 90 members in the pension plan. So it's about half of them that can take a lump sum, I believe, roughly,
Okay.
maybe a little bit more. On the Board of Ed side, I'm not sure about the town side, if there's still, if they've all lost that option, or if there's still, I thought there was a few that were grandfathered.
There's a handful.
Yeah. I didn't think there were any that were left, but there might be a few.
I think it behooves us, if we haven't done this already, to make a calculation to say if they all, in these days, in these crazy days, if 45 people decided to go now and take a lump sum, what happens? That's worst case. I think it's.
Linda, this is Katie. Linda obviously has been looking at this. I literally spoke to Dr. Freeman today about setting up a meeting to talk some more about it. So we are as I think I mentioned last week, we needed a little time to deal with school reopening and all the attention we were giving to that. But literally today brought that up with Dr. Freeman. So we will be moving our attention to this matter.
Yeah, great. No,
Linda
Dr.
has
Bell-Tracy.
obviously already identified that she has been looking at it.
Yeah, no, we didn't expect anything really till November, as we discussed last month. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
wonderful.
because
Thank you.
our consultants have already put the numbers together for the Board of Ed, so they do have something that they can look at.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Pension? Move on. All right, item number 4, review and accept the report of expenditures for the Board of Education, September 2020. Linda Trudeau, Amy Sullivan, and as needed, Dr. Balistraci. The floor is yours.
All right, thanks. So I think I unmuted, yep. The expenditures, this is for the September 2020 financial reports. For September, we're at $4,846,376.44. This puts us almost identically to where we were last year. We are 21.15% of the budget, and last year we were at 21.27. We did have some revenue this month, $2,886, of which $908 was for Medicaid reimbursement and a little over $1,900 from pre-K tuition. Salaries, I'm just going to go through the list a little bit. The salaries are about the same as the year of last year, excuse me, but the central office certified salaries are less. And this is because last year we carried Anne and Anine as assistant superintendents for a time. And then going forward, it will be similar with Rick and Julia. Rick Macenti will be fully retired at the end of the month. The employee benefits are up because of unemployment compensation, most related to COVID and people being out of work. Some substitutes, coaches, people that worked for us in the past, a lot of different reasons. Tuition is a bit lower than it was last year. That's due to timing of payments. We don't expect that to remain that way. Supplies and materials are lower. Capital is a bit lower. Transportation is a bit lower because of just changes to everything. We do have a separate COVID line, which I know we've been talking about for things such as salaries specific to it and additional things just related to COVID. I did learn, which I didn't know, that with the bus monitors that we added this year are employees of specialty, not employees of Guilford Public Schools. So to worry about that. We did receive some grant money, ESSER, which stands for ES, or the abbreviation is ESSER. I won't even attempt to tell you what that all is, but we got $117,000 from that, and there's a second grant pending COVID relief fund that is twice that. And so that puts the warrants at a little over $2 million for the month. And anyone that has any questions, I will attempt to answer them.
I do. I have one question regarding the teachers line and COVID. Why is that broken out that way so that it's $10,560? And why is that not covered in teacher salaries? Why should
Sorry,
that?
I'm just.
That is broken out because we had to add 2.2 FTEs at the high school to reduce class sizes. So because they were specifically added due to the virus, we can possibly use some of the funding that we're getting from the federal government to offset those salaries. They weren't budgeted teachers, they were only added to minimize the class size.
Right. Okay, that's helpful.
We're trying to be, I think, as organized as possible in the extra expenses that we don't usually incur due to COVID, so that we're clear where it's going.
So everything in the code.
Where that line is?
No, go ahead, Jonathan. What, you might have had the same question I had. Go
Can
ahead.
you just tell me where that line is? I was just looking for it.
Which line?
You
On
broke out.
page 4.
You talking about the teachers line or? because my question very quickly was on the revenue, where on the grant money, not the revenue, the grant money. Does that appear anywhere yet, or?
Not yet.
Yeah, okay.
I'm going to add, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to show it on here, but in that section, I will have the revenues and try and track them
What the offset is.
line to offset it.
Okay.
The ESSER grant, I haven't done any transfers to that grant yet, and the Coronavirus Relief Fund grant hasn't been approved yet. We're actually submitting modifications to the allocation by this Friday, and then hopefully the state will turn around and approve it quickly. So that one's not finalized yet, and that one's $470,000.
470?
Yes.
Okay.
No money has been provided for the bus monitors yet?
Well, we haven't had any expenses yet because that's billed by Specialty Transportation, and they haven't billed us yet for any of their busing services.
But we will see something there.
Yes.
Yeah. Wherever there's a blank, which is bus monitors, crossing guards, professional development, it's expected that there's going to be expenses there.
Yes.
Correct.
Right. So just in recap of this report, when I was looking at the expenditures through August 31st, that looks to be about 193,500, call it, of expenditures through August. September, we added 162. And there's a $435,000 in encumbrances that are mostly under safety, sanitation, supplies, software, and equipment. So if I read this correctly, the balance right now related to COVID is floating just short of 800,000.
Yes.
Obviously not including the grant. That's just the expenses we've incurred at this point.
Yes, from July 1st on, there were some expenses in last year.
So it ramped up pretty, with not really a question, but it ramped up fairly significantly over the last couple months because school's in session.
Yes.
Okay.
One of the biggest expenses was the tents that were added at 6 of the 7 buildings. That's providing outdoor classroom space and a place to expand lunch service so the kids can space out more, and also provide some mask breaks so the kids can be outside, take off their masks a little bit, and still be in a controlled environment.
Is that under supplies?
It is under
Equipment and encumbrance.
I think it's well, so we had to pay a deposit of it. So it's split up between expenses and I believe it's all in equipment.
Okay.
So
That was going to be a question I was going to have under warrant. So I'll just knock that out now, is that there was something that triggered it. There was something about storage, COVID related storage, and there was a list of them in the warrants, not to jump ahead. But then I was wondering where the tents, where those tents were going to be located in terms of not physically located, but where the expenses were going to be.
right. So there's parts of the expenses are under equipment. There might be some pieces under safety and sanitation because we had to do some groundwork and bring in a lift. So there might be some other pieces. So there's still some things on here that might be moved around a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The tents probably right now are easily $350,000 to $375,000 with all the other equipment and labor and other pieces that we need. And our staff helped install the tents. So that cut down on some of the expenses for bringing in other labor.
Is the intention of those tents, I should know the answer to this, I should maybe read the articles a little bit better, but is the intention of those tents to be all year, the whole school year?
They can be, yes.
It's not temporary for a month or two. This is to go right through the school year, right?
Right, and they are snow rated, so they will be able to support a snowfall. So it's not like a wedding event tent.
Okay,
They're,
heavy duty.
yes, they're heavy duty. They would be heated from a unit outside, so it wouldn't be like the propane heaters that you see, when you go outdoors at a restaurant.
Okay,
So it would be heated outdoors, and the heat would be pumped in through hoses.
okay.
So,
It's like the sports bubble
Yeah,
yes.
would you,
in
could
North
you,
Branford.
Linda or Dr. Bell Tracy, could you indulge me for a second? People in town seem to confuse me with my much smarter and better looking brother who knows about these things. And they keep asking me about these tents. And I mean, they're more than tents. They're substantial structures. And
Yes.
are other districts doing this? Do we get,
Oh, yeah.
we chose these?
Yes,
We chose
yes.
these instead of pole barns, or we chose these why and what?
So it's I think a popular trend for many school districts because it will allow us to extend outdoor activity significantly. And then once it gets cold enough to require the sides to come down, it just provides another really large
Mhm.
space.
A few more minutes.
There are some schools that are trying to hold as many classes outside as possible until the weather doesn't permit it. Our approach was to make sure that we had a tent at each school. There are 2 at the high school. Cox is the only school that doesn't have it, but it already has a built-in overhead.
overhang.
But it is actually, and in fact, we got some letters. Amy can attest to this as well. We got some emails over the summer asking if we could get tents covering all the sports fields for as much outdoor activity as possible. As you can imagine, there are lots of considerations that went into not quite being able to do that. But
I know testing went on at the fire department about how to heat a tent, and they pulled out all the equipment. And they got very involved. It was all very interesting.
yeah,
are
well,
things you learn.
and I think, right, I don't think Cliff is on anymore, but the tents went up, but then it took some time to make them actually usable for those reasons, right? We had to make sure that the fire department inspected them, et cetera. So.
And the building department.
And the building department.
Great. No, I know. I think people know why they're there. They're just curious about the plant and equipment aspect of them, and how they got chosen and so forth. So it's very interesting.
I've got a question too. It's about the unemployment compensation. I kind of had this loose understanding that by executive order, we would keep, all staff on the payroll through the crisis. And I'm curious why the unemployment compensation is so high compared to same time last year.
So it's a lot of substitute teachers, which we didn't pay through all this. It's people who worked back, may have resigned in June of last year, but because of the look back period for unemployment, we get a portion of their unemployment. We get a portion of anybody that left within the last year. There were a number of people on the unemployment bill that even though we are paying them, they may have had a second job, and we are getting a portion of their unemployment bill. So there's a lot of different reasons why we have these large unemployment numbers. The actual bills have been running around $25,000, and I'm removing off people who I think we shouldn't be eligible to collect from us and adjusting the bills down. So the bills have been substantial.
Take that one step further. There was no requirement at all to keep everybody on staff.
Yeah, I do want to thank you. I do want to, Jonathan, just clarify that that the approach in the spring was when school was fully remote. The approach changed when we started having teachers in the buildings, expected to be in the buildings teaching our kids, and 2 cohorts of kids coming in. So it's a different approach once we were no longer fully remote.
You needed a different set of staff. You had a different set of staff needs. Right, so.
There was also under the under some of the leave acts where employees were eligible to take a leave and get 2/3 of their pay, they're allowed to collect unemployment to make up that 1/3. They don't get the full 1/3, but they get a good portion of that. So even though we were paying them a portion of their salary while they were on a leave during COVID and the shutdown, they were still able to collect unemployment.
I had another question too about the busing line. This is probably just some catch up for me by not being around last month, but it looks like we haven't paid out any money for busing yet.
Nope.
Is that right? Except for special education buses? So no
Right.
fuel, no regular buses?
No.
Is that just timing?
Yeah, they haven't sent us a bill yet. I actually have to call
Okay.
them tomorrow to ask the bill. I
That's-
haven't seen a bill
that's
yet
usually
for
been
them
the
at
case.
all.
That's usually been the case. They're like a month or two behind usually. Which is
Okay,
a
but
pain
this
when it
is
comes to
still
encumbrances.
We'll still be paying the busing company for busing, even if
Yes.
we're not utilizing it.
I think we are still utilizing the buses, just the capacity is down.
Right,
Right.
yeah, we haven't stopped utilizing or minimized utilizing, we just minimize the people on the buses through parents driving and things like that.
Remind me again, were there any contract changes? Reductions, negotiations, anything that? I know there was an attempt to talk to the bus company and.
That's still the intent. We have not been able to connect with them yet to have that discussion regarding any modification for the Wednesdays when there's not any transportation occurring, or the reduced number of days down to 177.
Yeah, I might be a little bit, yeah, if anything, it's going to be days, I'd be a little bit surprised. You still have the same number of buses, the same number of drivers, the same needs, you just don't have as many kids, so, on the
Well,
bus.
they're not transporting on Wednesdays. So,
Oh, the one less day. Oh,
Yeah,
I didn't think of, yeah, that's right,
yeah, it's only transporting on
4 days a week.
a week.
Okay.
Now, not keeping up with all the executive orders, are they allowing more capacity like they have been with the restaurants, or are we still at the same level for busing?
There
I
hasn't,
don't think anything's changed, right?
It's
The
each
school buses.
school district gets it approved by the state. So each school district is different.
Based on their plan, right?
Question about upkeep of building and grounds. It's now at, I believe, 74% of the budget has been expended or encumbered.
and
Are there
last year,
unusual items in
last
there?
last year at this time, it was almost 85%. That's because Mr. Gurnham does purchase orders ahead of time for all the anticipated items, everything from, the possibility of needing to do some tree work to every possible testing that needs to be done. So it's a lot of blanket purchase order and some purchase orders just in case. We're actually less than where we were last year at this time. And we get towards the end of the year, we start trying to adjust that down and close out the ones that aren't needed. But he tries to set it up so that he has something there just in case of emergency, that if he needs to do something, he already has the purchase order approving some funding.
Are there going to be any reductions in the busing contract at all, considering the lower ridership and?
No, we just brought that up, that right now, the only thing that might reduce it is the fact that they're transporting students 4 days a week versus 5. But that still needs to be discussed.
Yeah, not the population.
Right.
Okay, I have a couple of questions from the reports. The one, Linda, if you could provide some background on this, on the food services report, which was item 4 of the operations committee. Obviously, there's been dramatic changes in that projection. Are we going to need more money in that food services area?
It's something that we're talking about. September resulted in a loss of $98,000. Obviously, that is not sustainable. So we are in discussions of what we are going to do with that program moving forward. There are some one-time costs that occur in September, but even a loss of $80,000 a month is not sustainable. So we are looking at what we can do and trying to raise participation with the students in the elementary schools and Baldwin Middle School returning to 4 days a week. Even just today, we've seen an increase in the number of meals sold. So we're hoping participation is going to be picking up. We have been approved for free meals for all. So all students 18 and under are eligible for free meals. So we do get a different funding level for those meals. But it's something that we're talking about, and we're trying to do what we can to keep feeding the kids while they're in school and at home.
You did get a waiver from the USDA, though.
Yes.
Will that help us? Will that waiver allow for close to 100% support?
No, it's not 100%, but it's a different funding level than what we were receiving before.
Mm-hmm.
Are we on to warrants?
Ken, do you have anything else on the meeting minutes, agenda packet? I would say yes on the warrants. If I could real quick, on page 10, there's this, for the town of Guilford, the resource officer for 20,000.
Yes.
I just, remind me again, is that a one-time or is there another payment?
No, it's a one-time
It's
payment.
a one-time $20,000 payment, right?
Yes.
To town for the resource officer. Okay.
Right.
I just want to make sure it was a one-time. I couldn't remember. So that's it.
Yes.
Jonathan, you had something on warrants?
You know, it wasn't a super big item, but I saw some repair for the HVAC at the high school. And I thought to myself, boy, isn't the stuff warranted? Or it just seemed so soon to have repairs on the high school HVAC. Maybe it was just maintenance came in as a repair.
I
What
will
page?
double check.
It
but
was
I
on page,
believe-
What page was it on, Jonathan?
it's on page 1,
On
near
page
the
1.
bottom.
It usually is.
$3,150.
It's most likely maintenance stuff, but we can figure that
Air
out.
dynamics is usually, yeah, it says repairs,
Yeah.
but I think you've said before, Linda, that a lot of times repairs also equals maintenance. Filters,
Yeah,
piping.
there was something with the high school that only had a 5-year warranty, and I'm not sure if this is the one or if it's the one on page 11, I believe it was. For the chiller fans at the high school. I will double check and get back to you tomorrow on it, but one of them,
It's not a huge item, Linda. I'm just curious how our HVAC is holding up at the newer high school.
I will double check to see what the details are of both those bills,
All right.
just to follow up.
I was hoping it would last us 10 years or something, you know?
Not too much comes with a 10-year warranty anymore.
Question about those desk shields, the $25,000 for desk shields. Does that cover the entire district or is that one building? What is it? It's all
That
on
might
page-
be part of one building.
We
Part
wish.
of one building.
Which one was that, Ken? There's so many of them.
Page 7, 25,6. David Dobbs Enterprises, 25,645.
I think David Dobbs was the high school, and that is not all of them. That might be the cafeteria one. No, that might be the desk ones. That might be the ones for the desks, not for the cafeteria. There've been numerous companies for desk shields. So we've bought them for student desks for the elementary schools so that they can eat lunch in the classroom. We've bought them for the tables in cafeterias for Adams and for the high school to separate those. We've bought them for tables in Baldwin because they don't have individual desks. And there've been a number of different companies. So there's been a lot for desk shields.
With the kids eating in the classrooms, is that, I noticed on the expense that there's a bump up in the lunch aid or lunchroom aids, or it's actually a little bit down, but do you expect that there's going to be a higher line item for lunch aids over the course of the school year for the elementary schools?
Yes, and there's actually on the well, it's now the 4-page summary.
Mhm.
There's an additional line there for recess and lunchroom aids. So the ones, we've added ones specifically to go into the classrooms to cover lunches so that the teachers can have their lunch. So the ones that were added specifically for COVID for this temporary assignment will be on that section. And then the other one, the rest of them will go to what was budgeted. Keep in mind, we started late, so they didn't start getting paid till halfway through September. So that's why it's a little bit behind on the regular budgeted part.
Okay, and like the buses, they're only working 4 days a week.
Right.
I have one more question on warrants. It's the very last one. Zoom video. The $15,000 subscription, how much does that cover?
I thought it was the entire district, but
For the entire year?
I thought it was for the entire year, but I just saw two
Okay,
come in today that were like $1,800. One of them was for up to 500 people. One of them said 300 participants. So there were two
Right.
different levels to cover the different meeting groups.
okay. I mean, not a surprise that's going to be a big expense for a school district, but I was just wondering how often we're going to see a $15,000 expense for Zoom.
Yeah, no, I think it's, I believe it was an annual expense for the whole district.
Okay.
So these two other smaller bills that I just saw come in today. And some of that can be covered under some of the grant funds that we received. It's considered an eligible expense.
Good,
So hopefully we'll get some of that covered.
good, okay.
Did we reopen today for full in-class instruction?
K through
Uh,
6.
Yes, well, kindergarten through 6th grade, elementaries through Baldwin opened for 4 days of instruction, all students.
And the high school, when is that scheduled for?
High school right
So,
now is staying,
Yeah,
sorry.
no solid date yet. Hoping, we're waiting for a few more bits of plexiglass for lunch and a few other things. We did not select an official date at this point.
I see where substitute teachers are down. Is that, I guess it's a credit that our teachers are coming in pretty strong numbers. There hasn't been any pushback or anything that would indicate that trend's not going to continue so far, right?
Well, again, with the delay in the opening of school, that pushed that off a little bit. So right now, I think the number of substitutes is down. I don't know if that trend's going to continue.
Thanks.
I'm hoping, but
Yeah, we all are.
But Jeff, if I may, and I think I said this last month, it is a credit to our teaching staff that they showed up. That this was not, there are districts that thought they weren't going to be able to open because they didn't think they'd have enough teaching staff. That was not an issue for us.
We didn't have an overwhelming number of retirements.
Right,
Also.
exactly right, exactly right.
not in the teaching levels, no.
Yeah.
Our teachers came back.
Anything else for Board of Education? I only had one other item under budget timeline. I guess now would be the time to mention, I know that there's a Board of Education Operations Committee public input workshop this Wednesday at, I believe it's 7:30, right?
No, I think
At
that
7.
incorrect date. It goes to the,
Well,
Yeah.
I know that there's an October 21st for this Wednesday, and then on the budget timeline, there is one for the 28th. My question is there two, or did it get moved, or how did that? I know it was a draft, so it wasn't approved, so this might be slightly older. I was just wondering what.
I had it originally in my calendar for the last week in October, but then all the communications came out with it as this Wednesday, so I was a little confused.
yeah, I believe it's this Wednesday.
I'm bringing it up for both knowledge of the board as well as, obviously for, I don't know if this won't probably appear on GCTV by Wednesday, but just for clarification purposes. Because I know I do plan on listening in and attending that to hear what the public has to say for that.
I mean, it went out as an email blast to the, for the 21st at 7:30.
Yes.
That's what I have.
It went out on October 16th to everybody.
Yes. So the
By Lori.
28th date was my error.
Was okay. I just wanted to clarify, that's all.
Yeah, so there is only one
Okay.
for this time of year, right? 2 in January.
And I do plan on attending, and, obviously if the rest of the board can try to listen in, we wouldn't have any active, real active participation, of course, but to just listen in at least live, so that we don't get it, a month later. Might be helpful. We're going to have lots of discussion about the budget anyway, but it's a good precursor. Anything else for Linda, Katie, or Amy?
One quick question on special ed. How, is there any trends that we can see? Are there surprises, or either pleasant or unpleasant surprises that we've seen thus far with regard to special education?
Thank you. I actually get to give good news for a change. So right now, our projection is that we are under budget by $150,000. Keeping my fingers crossed that this is going to stay. We have 2 students that we're working on a settlement, but I've included some figures in there, which I'm actually thinking I might be on the high side for. So right now our numbers are a little bit below the numbers that we budgeted for. So we're at 29 private placements. We budgeted for 31. We're at 33 public tuition, and we budgeted for 34. So our numbers right now are looking good. I'm hoping it's going to stay. But right now I get to actually give good news for once. Very often.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Trudeau, Dr. Balistraci, Ms. Sullivan, appreciate your time. With that, I will entertain a motion to accept the report of expenditures of the Board of Education for the month of September 2020 in the amount of $4,846,376.44.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? Fantastic. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 5, review and approve report of expenditures for town government for September 2020. Mary Jane?
I have a lot of stuff on the agenda, so we're going to get started.
Let's get to it.
We'll start with revenues. Revenues at the end of September were slightly down. A couple things to note. Tax collection, as you can see, was down a little bit as from September 30 to September 30. Bills were actually due October 1st. The numbers as of October 1st, we were down 3.7% from last year. So it's actually a pretty decent number at this point, and did not affect our cash flow whatsoever. So we'll continue to monitor that as we move forward. Finance, we don't even want to look at interest rates for finance. That number is very low, so we will be looking to monitor that as we move forward as well. And we already talked about the selectmen revenue being mostly the rebates from the energy performance contract. So,
Mary Jane,
yes,
sorry to interrupt, but on finance,
yes.
oh, wait a minute. Sorry. I have it very small and I just read it wrong. I was wondering if the percentage was actually 1.6, and now I'm looking at it. Yeah, it is. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
unfortunately, it's
Yeah.
1.6.
I was like, no, it can't be. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Okay.
it is.
All right, go ahead.
Are we
So I
still
don't-
trying to keep that money invested though, like we did last year
Say that again?
in a similar way? Are we still trying to keep all the tax revenue invested in a similar way as last year?
No change in how we manage our investments. All the money that we can, we put in investments. Most of it goes into STIF. We do have other investment mechanisms that we use. They are just all unfortunately at very low levels at this point.
Wow, so much less.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, I had a high the last year, so I guess that was my
Short-lived.
hurrah. Any other questions on revenue?
When did we want to talk about is it later on in one of the agenda items with the selectmen revenue? Being at the 280,
That's the energy performance contract proceeds that we've received. And as Matt noted, we will be sending some of that over to the Board of Ed and then determining what to do with what's left for us. But we'll discuss that at the next meeting.
we are going to, okay, we'll discuss it next meeting. So right now it's just, it'll be there. We're not doing anything with it right now.
Correct. Yeah, we haven't, it came in at the very end of September, so we haven't finalized that yet.
Understood.
And that number will likely go up when we get the rebates from the utility companies, from Eversource.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
I did have one question on that though. Why wouldn't we automatically put that in the reserve fund?
Well, at this point, we don't know, what number we're going to give to the Board of Ed. We have to look at the different buildings that it represents and divvy it out between the two of us before we can even determine what pot of money it's going into. And then we can, determine
I
from
mean, it
there.
just seems like surplus from last year.
No, these were anticipated revenues, as we talked earlier, that should have come in earlier, which would have gone to offset Board of Education expenses based on the anticipated savings from the energy performance contract. Those savings were not realized. The Board of Education did have to pay out more than they had anticipated, because they had, as well as the town side. We had anticipated those rebates coming in to offset energy costs as a result of the year 1 and year 2 of the contract. So it's my contention, again, it's Board of Finance's decision to do with the money what they should. But this is money that is owed to the Board of Education because it was fully anticipated to go to offset the cost. Because remember, they are carrying 80% of the fixed cost to finance the energy performance improvements. So that's in their budget. And these dollars were identified to offset those costs, particularly in the year 1 and year 2, when the full effect of the measures were not in place to realize the energy savings.
I agree. It's like for like accounting.
Yeah,
I don't
thanks,
know. I
Bob.
think the Board of Education last year still has a surplus, so this would have just added to surplus if it had come in at the right time.
But it didn't come in last year, Jonathan. It's coming in this year.
All right. I mean, if it's a cash accounting standard, then I understand, but it just seems like those are revenues that were just late to the table that
Right.
should be associated with the previous year. And then isn't there an expectation that we'll have some kind of revenue for this year?
I think we're seeing it right now.
Well, that was kind of a question earlier. Do we
For
accrue?
the utility
accrue?
savings that we'll encounter this year?
That was a question earlier. Do we accrue for this or do we treat it on a cash basis? And obviously it's being treated on a cash basis when realized.
Right. Because our
I
expenses,
don't feel like this money is earmarked for spending. This is surplus or just return.
It's already
to the
been
taxpayer.
spent. It's already been spent. It's basically coming back to us from expenditures we've already made.
It all goes to the same place.
I see this as revenue exceeding expenses for the prior year.
No, if
that
I'm
they
not
were not,
mistaken-
they were not received in the prior year.
right.
That's true.
But the expenses were paid in the prior year.
Exactly.
We fronted it. We fronted the performance and now we're getting it back. So yeah, it came in this year, but we spent it last year. It's just,
To refresh everybody's memory, the incentives that we're seeing there were placed at the front end of this contract for a very specific reason. And that was that the anticipated savings from over the 20-year life of this project would accrue over time. And the first year, 2 years, or 18 months were anticipated to be relatively flat. And during that time, both entities would be responsible for paying down the debt on it. So those incentives were built into the front end of it. So they paid higher than anticipated energy costs as opposed to what they pay this year and next year. And they also had to satisfy the debt service retirement. So basically they coddled together, Board of Education more so than the town did, coddled together ways to accommodate those fixed energy costs and those new debt service costs and did not realize the benefit of those rebates, which was intended at the time at the outset. They should have gotten them during those times. Jonathan, your point's well taken. Would they have had higher surplus? Possibly. Would they may have not had to freeze certain things and not done certain things last year? Most likely.
And I'm not sure how the Board of Education did their budget for the current year, but at the time we put this budget together, we were unaware of the amount of savings that we were going to have. So if you remember, I commented a couple of months ago that we actually budgeted the higher rates. So this would just offset what the budget we have for this year as well. It's another way to look at it.
I don't think anybody would agree that this is elegant, but it's the best you could do. If it were a bigger portion of the budget, you might want to institute stronger controls and rules, but I think it's perfectly acceptable the way it is.
and again, we'll have more direction next month.
I'd like to see the money go into surplus, be returned to the taxpayer.
We know you would.
Seems like it's automatically being injected into the budget for expenditures for this year.
You just have to ask them for it back in 6 months, Mr. Trotta.
Well, we have it in our revenue. Putting it in our revenue does not allow anyone else to expend it. It didn't offset any expenditures, so it's not increasing any expenditure on our side. It's purely increasing our revenues.
Kind of push off a surplus till next year instead of where I feel like it was incurred last year.
We'll be talking.
All right. I mean, I don't know technically how to account for it, but it just seems like it's associated with last year's revenue, even though it's late. What is year one and year two specifically for the energy performance contract? I mean, do we even know what those dates span to? Span from and to?
No, I'd
Maybe we
have to
don't have-
pull the schedule out, Jonathan. I think we all probably have a copy of that schedule somewhere in our archive folders, but it's year one started in 2018, year two was 19, and we're currently in the third year. So this is going back to actually 2018 experience year, which meant the payment would have had to have been made in 2019. Because JCI, unlike us, JCI is on a fiscal calendar that's an annual one, not a municipal calendar.
So this would have been due December of 2019?
At some point in 2019, right?
All right,
Which-
I'm under the general impression that we're taking in too much surplus and not returning it to the taxpayer. So, I'd like to see money be returned to the taxpayer. I may be alone in that.
Based on the presentation you just saw from the Board of Education, it's very much likely that it's going back to the taxpayer to cover some of the shortfalls in the budget as related to COVID-19, and the fact that at some point we may have to deal with a significant shortage to cover those expenses. Because while we are already receiving some federal funds, I'm not sure anyone at this table is going to say that they are comfortable that we will get all of the COVID expenses paid for out of either the federal act or the Connecticut CARES money.
Right.
Would anybody maybe be a little bit confident that we'll end up with another budget surplus this coming year?
No way.
Not confident at all.
No.
On that one. No.
No way.
No, take a look at our current revenues. We're 3.7%, as Mary Jane indicated. We're 3.7% behind where we were on October 1 of 2019. And by my math, that's a little less than $3.7 million.
But isn't that just related to the delayed tax collection for October 1?
No, the taxes were due October 1. Now there may be more folks who are willing to pay some penalties, but year over year, with the 3-month extension to October 1st, we're down 3.7%. People's taxes were due on October 1st. So I think you can reasonably expect that there'll be some measure of folks who are not going to be able to pay their taxes.
Yeah, plus the mortgage deferment is just coming due. So some
Right.
people haven't even paid their mortgage for the last several months.
And
And
take into account all the people that maybe can't pay in October. Will they be able to pay in January? My concern is the January 1 taxes that are due as opposed to the ones that are due now.
Agreed.
And the
That
lower,
3.7
and the lower finance interest rates. We're not making as much money on our money either.
No,
So at this time, that 3.7% looks like delinquent taxes as opposed to just delayed payments that coming in at, in the last couple of days.
correct, because October 1 was the due date. So as of October 1, we were at that 3.7. So that meant,
Yeah.
there were
The
some.
delays already
delays.
happened. Now we're
Right.
in delinquency.
I don't want people to walk away thinking that all of that 3.7% is delinquent. There may well be some people who used to pay their tax bill in its entirety on July 1st or August 1st, whatever it is, but for whatever reason are no longer doing so, are no longer capable of paying their entire tax bill. So I do not assume that all 3.7% of that is delinquent.
Very good point.
we also need to keep in mind that part of that 3.7% was achieved by that $289,000 revenue line in the Board of that the selectmen brought in, that rebate. It's not, it would have been worse but for that revenue that we received from the energy cost savings program.
Jeff, I hate to quibble with you, but I think the 3.7 was
Is just
specifically
taxes.
Is just taxes?
Yes.
Okay, tax.
Yeah, overall, we're down 4.3, but Okay. Hey, Mary Jane, anything else on revenue?
Not
Other
from
than-
my end.
Other than that, Lincoln, how's the play?
All right, we'll move on to expenditures.
All right, expenditures are just about where we were last year. One item I wanted to be sure to bring to your attention is the registrar of voters. We did receive the Secretary of State grants that I discussed at the last meeting. And as soon as the election is over, we will be applying that grant to the appropriate line items in that budget. And as Matt pointed out earlier at the Board of Selectmen meeting, we did have a primary that is also included in those numbers this year. But like I said, the Secretary of State grant should cover a lot of that, and also just some regular COVID reimbursements should be able to cover that difference there as well. Other than that, I don't really have too many highlights to bring up for the expenditures unless anyone has a specific question.
A couple of questions.
Yep.
On tree removal, I saw that there was about, of course, we had other episodes other than COVID, and we had to come up with an additional $10,000 in tree removal for natural resources. And that takes us only to about 35% of the budget. I'm just wondering, are we awaiting more tree removal charges? I'm surprised that the number is that low, actually. I thought it was going to be much higher, considering the damage that was done in that storm.
Well, we did attribute some of the tree removal to the storm damages. Unfortunately, not sure if that FEMA declaration is coming through. So I don't believe we're going to be receiving any funding from that. But as far as I know, whatever we needed to be done has been taken care of. So we're just doing better in that line item than anticipated.
The line item for Public Works is running a little hot, so maybe it's in there.
Public Works is just one enormous item for chip sealing. On
Right.
Summer road repair, that seems to have taken all the money out.
Yeah, but chip sealing is really just taking care of what we have stored at the stump dump. It's not taking down the trees.
No, I know that. I'm looking at another area.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob, you're absolutely right. Public Works is hot because of the overtime related to those two
Storm
storms.
damage.
Yeah, storm damage, let's hope for a mild winter. But clearly, and we've identified some of those overtime costs. We've also identified equipment costs. We've identified the several items related to those storms. But as Mary Jane just indicated, it's looking unlikely that we're going to get FEMA disaster relief off of those storms.
Yeah, I don't believe we met the required minimum for our county for those storms, so we were not declared.
We kept trying to find additional costs, as did all of our counterparts, but it just did not rise to that level.
Should we go out and break something?
Got any trees that look like they need to come down, Bob?
I got tons.
Well, we're in a lot better shape than our neighbors in Branford and North Haven, so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, tornado damage in Branford was really pretty bad. I saw that on my route home.
Yeah, even with all that damage, we weren't able to meet the FEMA level.
I was
Yeah,
curious.
and actually, there was some pretty significant damage out in Satcham's Head area. That area of town got impacted pretty dramatically as well.
Yep, couple trees in my yard specifically. Got a question about the insurance line. It just looks like kind of all the insurance is running a bit high. Is there a reason for that? Sometimes I ask and timing is always the answer.
Well, we do typically pay our insurance more. So we've probably paid 2 installments of insurance already, 2 quarters. We would probably have paid the end of September for the October quarter. That's why most of the insurances are at 50%.
Okay,
I
we're
think,
not that far off from last year.
Jonathan, I think on the insurance side, we're going to see some revenue come in. Kerma, our CCM insurance subsidiary that we do most of our insurance work with, has issued a credit, will be issuing a credit to the members in light of some significant investment returns that they've had. So they're putting back in terms of rebates to all member communities. So we'll see some offset coming from CCM and Kerma.
Okay,
News to me. Good.
thank you.
Small item, very small item, but I was just wondering what the status was. Economic development. I know why the number is lower. Has there been any movement on any economic development director, or what's the status with that?
Mike, my apologies if I didn't convey this directly to you. We have hired an interim economic development coordinator.
Okay.
That is Sherry Cody, who some of you may know is also the president of or executive director of the Shoreline Chamber of Commerce. Couple of things put this in motion. The first of which was after Brian announced his retirement, I had some conversations with Peggy Lyons and Ryan Dukes, Peggy being the first select woman, Ryan Dukes being the chair of the Economic Development Commission in Madison, about the possibility of sharing a resource between the two communities. I also had some conversations with the Economic Development, our town's Economic Development Commission, about the specific needs of an economic development and a role of an economic development coordinator here in town. There are some on that commission who are pushing for more of a full-time position. I'm not sure I'm there yet. If we were to engage in a partnership with Madison, it has some challenges, I think, and that's an inherent conflict choosing between two communities as to where you would place businesses or direct businesses. And I'm not sure how comfortable I am with that. However, I have committed to a sit down with Peggy and our respective economic development commissions to try to flesh that out. Given that, and then also the fact that the Shoreline Chamber of Commerce is significantly reduced their operations owing to COVID because they can't hold any in-person events, which is where they make a significant portion of their revenues are based on their programs. So Sherry was down to, I believe it's 50% pay. And there's only one other staff member from the Shoreline Chamber who is currently still actively employed. Everyone else was furloughed. I had conversations with board members at the Shoreline Chamber prior to offering Sherry the position. And they're thrilled because they think it allows them to continue to keep the Shoreline Chamber operating. They would find it difficult to find anyone to come in on a part-time basis to do that work. So Sherry accepted the position, and the reason for the revenue decline is it was a little over a month before Sherry actually filled that position. Sherry signed a 6-month contract, renewable at my discretion, and in the little over a month and a half that Sherry's been there, she has already delivered a 90-day plan. In addition, she has shepherded through the Economic Development Commission a report on potential tax incentive programs for both commercial and residential developers. So I'm thrilled that she's in the spot, and I think we're going to see some good things come from her. That's more than you wanted to know, but the reality is Brian was not in the position, and Sherry didn't start until first or second week of September.
I wanted to know all that. That's fine. Thank you. No,
I think that was great.
I'm very pleased that we got someone like that to be in the position for now.
Good news.
Anything else on expenses? we can move on to warrants. Take your pick. Special fund, weekly, anything on warrants?
Quick question, just because I ask about it every month. So there's the Malone and McBroom expansion and the special fund weekly warrant for the consent order. Are we almost at the end of that experience?
Yeah, we are actually. The most recent proposal went to the Army Corps of Engineers relative to the mitigation project. And this project now revolves around the Chittenden area and marsh restoration. We have, I think you are aware, we have an agreement with DEP that has been executed. We have made our respective payments in terms of the fines and also to their mitigation funds. So in terms of the DEP, we're done. We think that the project at Chittenden will satisfy the Army Corps of Engineers in terms of mitigation. We still don't know if the Army Corps will then waive any associated fines for our previous transgressions. But at this point, we're confident, pretty confident that our mitigation plan will meet the requirements for the restoration of a certain amount of wetlands and marshland based on what we encroached on with those actually four significant violations.
Great.
What is the, on weekly warrants,
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
what is the $8,000 commitment on COVID-19 for information systems? Can someone explain that to me?
Actually, I'll piggyback on that. There's two of them for video conferencing systems for HB Communications. Just curious where those where those were installed or where was that placed?
That's in the Selectmen's wing.
Yeah.
And we have a proposal for installing similar like systems at the community center. The challenge with the community center is trying to devise a system that will both accommodate your meetings when you're back in that building and also the larger meetings in the not the auditorium, but the downstairs room. So we're working on those on that solution at this point. That would be portable, yet still be flexible enough, still be effective enough to cover your meetings in your room.
That's great. Is that in coordination with GCTV?
Yes, we have been working with GCTV.
Good.
As you can well imagine, GCTV is very much concerned about their continuing role, particularly if once we return to in-person meetings. Some of these technologies, the technologies we have, are going to enable live streaming, and that I think offers a significant opportunity for our community in addition to what we currently do with making it available. The question is, can we live stream and allow GCTV to capture and then run it on their programming? And that's what we're working, HB, GCTV, and ourselves are working closely with. In fact, we had allocated, you had allocated $7,500 in the technology, in capital for technology for GCTV for the current fiscal year. And they are, as well as we in HB, evaluating whether or not we buy another cart, which in my mind's eye is buying 1990s technology, or do we do something different? Do we have them spend that money to create a different capacity or use technology in a different fashion?
Okay. Sandwiched in between that, Guilford Public Schools General Fund, undistributed receipts, 6,200, and the invoice description is, I have no idea what that stands for, so I'm just curiosity what that would be for undistributed receipts.
I'm not sure where you are, Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm right. Like 12 down, Guilford Public Schools on weekly warrants. Right in between the two video conferencing, there's one for Undistributed receipts, 62,819. And then the invoice description, I can't really decode that.
Oh, that's a pass through to the Board of Education.
Okay.
That's a state grant.
State
That code
grant.
is a state grant.
It's a state grant. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on warrants?
On special funds, there's a figure of $27,500 for housing rehab on Westlake Avenue. What does that involve?
That is a small cities CDBG grant that we had garnered for a couple of years ago. We had garnered $440,000 for those low-income folks who needed housing rehabilitation programs. So this is a pass-through. There are some 20 odd, and I know Megan's shaking her head. She's aware of several of the beneficiaries of this program. Those monies are allocated after folks go through an application, a qualification process, where they are entitled to those funds for health and safety improvements on their homes. One example is we had a woman who was benefited from this, whose house had been under a blight order for probably 18 months to 2 years. But the monies that are granted to those folks, and there's a lien placed on the property, the monies are then due upon transfer of the property at no interest. So it's an interest-free loan until such time as that property changes hands, and then the money needs to be satisfied. It goes back into the fund and can be used for other beneficiaries going forward. So that's one of those 18 or 19, I can't remember exactly how many projects we have from folks who are benefiting from that.
Okay. Moving on from warrants. Medical. Lower month than expected in September, but the total claims, catastrophic claims, seem to be a big number.
It is a big number. It represents two very large claims.
Two.
Yeah, so, typically this year we might have a number of small claims. This year we have two large claims.
Okay.
So
yeah, I didn't know if it was a quantity or a high number for minimal. So okay.
Yeah, there's actually a total of 4 claims altogether that have hit the level of the 75,000, but 2 of them are very significant, which have gone over the 150.
Okay. Okay. Anything else on medical?
Mary Jane, you want to say it? Wait. At the Board of Selectmen meeting this morning, looking at the size of the surplus, the reserve account, the fund balance at 6.7. We are getting perhaps closer to being able to make some kind of determination on whether or not there is still deferred medical expenses out there because of COVID-19. I think what you see for the first couple of months is we're anticipating about a $600,000 surplus, which would be lower than we had last year. Again, this board has been gracious enough to support the effort to fund the other post-employment benefits, largely exclusively out of the surplus funds in this account. And I think the Board of Selectmen would like you to consider doing the same thing. At this morning's meeting, the Board of Selectmen moved that we proceed to establishing the OPEB trust, formally establishing it. And I was party to some emails that went back and forth between Mary Jane, Pete Barrett, and our counsel at Shipman Goodwin. So we fully anticipate moving towards creation of that trust in short order. Some of the discussions this morning were, could we do another $1 million like we did last year? One man's opinion here, I think, is we could certainly do it. That would take the anticipated fund balance there to about 5.7 million. And one of the concerns that was raised this morning was once we move that money, does it have to stay there? Well, until such time as we actually move the money from the reserve fund that we have to an OPEB trust, that money is still available to be moved at the discretion of the Board of Finance. However, once that money is allocated to the trust, extricating it from the trust would be a significant challenge.
Mhm.
I did place an email.
Sorry.
I did place a call today to our health benefits consultant to seek some guidance from him as to where he feels our claims will go in, relative to COVID, what he might be seeing or what he's anticipating, so that we have a little better idea, or at least an educated idea, instead of just our guessing, whether or not our claims will go up at such point when COVID's not a concern. We don't know if people are still holding off on claims or not, and he may not either, but we're hoping to get some direction from him in the near future.
Mary Jane, quick question. I'm not intricately aware of the health benefit package, but there are certain things that you just can't carry over year to year, right? You can't have two physicals, two preventive physicals in the same fiscal calendar year, or not calendar year, but the same fiscal year. So there may be some stuff that the day-to-day stuff that people do that is not going to be replicated because they deferred it.
Yeah, I'm not even talking those day-to-day things. I'm more concerned about, some surgeries that people might be putting off that, aren't, needed at this time, but they might be just putting them off.
Yeah.
That type of thing. It's hard to make that guess, but
yeah, I don't even know
clearly our
how to
claims went down during COVID. So it's either people are going to put things off indefinitely, or we might see a big bump. Not sure.
No, I'm encouraged to hear about the continuation of the OPEB trust, which we've talked about a lot. I'm trying to remember, when was that meeting that we had? Was it like January?
It was, February.
Right, January. It was months ago.
We were ready to go. I should say I was ready to go in March. We were getting ready to put together our public hearings and our town meetings to do those ordinances, and something happened at that point which didn't allow us to do that. So I did speak to the Board of Selectmen this morning, stating that I was looking, to have that go forward, and they were more than supportive to help us, get that going. So
good. So you think you'll have an agenda item in November or you think you need a little bit more time than that to put the paperwork together?
I believe the selectmen are looking to bring this back up in November. Whether or not we'll have final recommendations, I don't know, but they are looking to bring that up again next month.
Okay.
Right, Matt?
Yes, in terms, I think the board is more interested at this point in the formalizing of the trust and charging the committee with managing, et cetera. In terms of moving the monies from this account at this point, I think that's secondary, but it is one consideration that the Board of Selectmen would like you to keep in the forefront of your minds. But clearly, there has become some urgency to establishing the trust.
Agreed.
That's largely because Mary Jane's insisting we do it.
Well,
it's my legacy.
Well, it's that, and our auditors like it too. So
I was just going to say, it helps us.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
That's, like I said at the Board of Selectmen meeting this morning, I am not a beneficiary of OPEB at all. So my contract doesn't include it, so it's not helping me. I'm only helping Guilford.
Well said.
Okay. Anything else on medical? We could shift over to the capital funds, which have been updated. I guess there were, in general, there were a couple of questions. Well, I don't know if they're questions. I guess on the school capital projects first, there are a few items that I noted, for example, and maybe well, I was going to say maybe Cliff could help out on this more, but because I know you coordinate with them, Mary Jane, but school classroom and space renovations from 11-12 fiscal year. There's classroom renovations and bathroom renovations that have a total of about $16,000 of fund balance in them. I guess my question ends up being, what would keep that, what keeps that open? Or what keeps any of them open for that matter that are older, that still have balances, but they don't look like they're being spent? Although I did correct myself looking at the educational improvements at various schools in 12-13, and I see facilities needs assessment, and there's a $8,200 expenditure from fiscal year 21, which comes from the needs assessment that's being done, I assume. So what triggers it to close it when there's still fund balances?
As I've stated in the past, I am looking to close these. I am purely waiting for the conclusion of our audit so that I know that our numbers are finalized. And as soon as that is done, I'll be coming to both boards to close out all the projects in the red. Okay. Highlighted in red, not is
okay. So the ones in red are the ones you're looking at.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if anything was. I didn't look back to see the capital reports from a quarter ago, so I was wondering if anything had come off, and if things had come off, but these didn't. Why? So I
know
it's audit purposes.
Right. It's not going to come off until your board specifically takes it off. Yep. So right now I'm really just waiting. Just in case there's some audit adjustment, I don't want to have to go back for a couple $100. I doubt there's going to be any difference, but waiting another month for the audit to be finalized is just prudent at this point.
Okay.
And as I've stated, we're concentrating on the Board of Ed side at this point because they have some of the older bonds, but we'll clearly be looking at the town side as well as we move forward.
Okay. Yeah, it's nice to get these quarterly just to remind us, so appreciate it. Anything else on capital? Anything else at all for the town? And if not, I will entertain a motion to approve the report of expenditures of the town for the month of September 2020 in the amount of $2,492,706.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Abstention?
I'm going to abstain. There's a item in one of the warrants for a rebate for a client of mine, but my firm's name is in there, so I'm not going to vote on it.
Okay, I skipped right over opposed. I don't think anyone was opposed. And then abstentions and recusals. So Jeff, you have one?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I as well. Any payments to Antonazzi Associates I'm recusing myself of. Okay. Moving on, item number 6, discuss and take possible action on debt budget transfers for fiscal year 2020-21 due to refunding. There's a memo here. Mary Jane, do you want to just do a recap, or do you want me to read the memo? How do you want to do it? Maybe just give us a recap.
Yeah, I think it's easier if I give you a recap.
It's very straightforward, but still better for you to do it.
Right. Since the refunding happened late in the fiscal year after the budget had been in place, we did not have true numbers. So what I'm looking to do is just adjust the principal and interest budget line items to match where we currently are with our debt schedule. The refunding has allowed us to cover the amount that we needed to transfer in from premiums. So whatever premiums we had, we were able to hold them there for another time. So you'll see, I'm not changing the amount of budget at all. I'm just reassigning them between the line items so that when we look at the debt budget for the upcoming year, we'll be able to
real
match
numbers.
the payments to payments.
They're real numbers. Okay.
So I have a question about this. So are we taking some savings that we achieved in interest and principal from refinancing basically from last year, and we're pushing that now to pay debt payments for this year's budget?
Well, because we had savings in this year's budget, it's not needed to take the premiums. It's just we've paid a lower amount, so the premiums aren't necessary to come from fund balance.
So the savings that we incurred for the refinancing was from this year.
Correct, this
Yeah,
year.
it was de minimis for last year. It was just.
Right, last year, like Bob said, it's a very small amount from last year. The true savings is in this year, the current year's
Okay,
budget.
understood.
Jonathan, what it does is, I know you'd be interested in this, it allows us to potentially use those premiums. We can anticipate the use of those premiums to offset debt payments in either the 2022 budget or subsequent years.
And I'm sure now our financial advisors are on notice that they should be letting us know when further opportunities arise to refinance.
Yes.
Thank
The
you.
question is what opportunities do we have based on the current debt service schedule we have, as well as some of the rules around refinancing.
Yep.
Mary Jane, how close do you think we are to having another round of opportunities?
I think it's gonna be a little bit before we see another round.
But again, I feel like we're injecting savings from, one fiscal year into covering principal and interest payments and premium payments for the next year.
No.
No, why pay
We're not.
twice?
This is strictly savings in this particular year. It's as if we had budgeted for streetlights and the bill came in less. It's
Okay.
the same thing.
I'm game for that.
Yep.
Thought you would be.
Okay. With that being said, for item number 6, I'll entertain a motion. I have all of these written out for all these next agenda items, make it easier. I'll entertain a motion to make the 2020-2021 debt budget transfers outlined in the memo dated October 9th, 2020 from Finance Director Mary Jane Malvasi to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. Rather than read all of that, that's my motion is as outlined.
Oh, and I will just add before you vote that the Board of Selectmen unanimously passed all of the motions for all of the transfers on the agenda today.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
All right. And your comment, Mary Jane, we could put in as the comment for that. So that's part of the motion commentary. For all of these, I'm going to do roll call vote just because it's not as blanket as the other ones. Megan Scanlon.
Aye.
Veronica Wallace.
Aye.
Ken Gammerman.
Aye.
Mike Ailes. Aye. Jeff Beatty.
Aye.
John Trotta.
Aye.
Bob Hartmann.
Aye.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Moving on, item number 7, consider and take possible action on salary budget transfers for fiscal year 2020-21 due to union contract finalizations. This is another straightforward reallocation. So Mary Jane?
As we discussed, as we were putting together this budget, since the contracts were not finalized as of the time this budget was put together, we did put money into reserve for personnel. So now that they are complete for at least this fiscal year, I'm making the request to move the money from reserve from personnel into the appropriate line items again, so that our budgets will match up for next year.
I would note that the budget that was approved was, as I looked it up, $351,531.
Reserve for personnel.
Right, reserve, that was the budget. So we came in, we're reallocating less than what we had budgeted.
337,200.
Right.
So moved.
Oh.
Second,
All right, so we're, okay, well, that's easy. Motion,
didn't even call the-
motion to move the
I like that.
337, 200 from reserve. We all know what it's gonna be. Tracy, you got that? I should actually read it to be formal. We're gonna move that 337, 200 from reserve for personnel into the line items indicated in the memo dated October 14th from our finance director. So we have a motion. We have a second. I'll do a roll call vote. Megan Scanlon,
Aye.
Veronica Wallace,
Aye.
Ken Gammerman,
Aye.
Mike Ailes, aye. Jeff Beatty,
Aye.
Jonathan Trotta,
aye.
Bob Hartman.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Item number 8, consider and take possible action on carry and force from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21, $51,744 for the purchase of a John Deere 6-foot mower for Parks and Recreation that was put on hold due to COVID-19.
Last spring, when our Park and Rec Director, Rick Maynard, came and requested to move forward with the purchase of the mower, it was right at the time that we were hit with COVID-19. And at that point, we had no idea how our cash flow was going to be affected. And he was asked to hold that off. So that fund, that money was still in last year's accounts. Normally we carry that over with a purchase order, and I have to admit that I missed that. We are coming to you today to ask for that money to be moved from the fund balance, from undesignated fund from last year into carried in force to be spent in this current year. And I'd just like to add that the mower in question is not just a mower, it includes a snow blower option and a cab, and it replaces a 1999 Toro. So we would like to move forward with that.
That was gonna be my questions. What's it replacing? A 1999 vehicle, huh?
Every once in a while, I got the answers.
For that kind of money, you should make breakfast, huh?
I guess I have a question on this one. If some of us are still worried that we might run a budget deficit this year, then why would we go ahead with this spending now when we were reluctant to spend it earlier?
I think we have seen tax receipts come in much higher than we originally anticipated they were going to be, even though they're down by a little bit. There is still a justifiable need for it. They're not going to be able to use the existing vehicle this winter. They had fully anticipated replacing it, which is why it was approved in the budget of that budget we put together in 2019. Which is now a year and a half ago, when they knew that machine was on its last legs.
So this is more of a cash flow issue that we weren't certain before, but we're in better shape now. And for $51,000, they should have a piece of equipment that they can use.
Agreed.
Yeah, and it should have been carried over with a purchase order at the end of the year, but like I said, I missed it.
Okay.
So some may have an expectation that we might have a budget deficit, but we think we're in better shape than we were a few months ago when we put off this purchase.
Correct.
Is that fair?
Basically correct, yeah.
And this money would just fall to unfunded, unallocated fund balance.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
not, it's
thank
not
you.
additional, it's just that as it says here, it's a transfer. It's already been approved, it's just a matter of bringing it into this year. All right, any other conversation? I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the transfer of $51,744 from fiscal year 20 fund balance carried in force to fiscal year 21 fund balance carried in force, as proposed in the memo dated October 9th, 2020 from our finance director.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, Megan Scanlon.
Aye.
Veronica Wallace.
Aye.
I got a little ahead of myself. Ken Gammerman.
Aye.
Mike Ailes. Aye. Jeff Beatty.
Aye.
Jonathan Trotta.
Aye.
Bob Hartman.
Aye.
Great. Item number 9, discuss and take possible action on transfers from undesignated fund as of June 30th, 2020. We have a memorandum dated October 16th, which I know we all have read. I'm sure Mary Jane and our first selectman probably have information to share with us regarding each of these requests.
We do. I will let Mary Jane start up by talking about where she anticipates the surplus and fund balance. I think this is no surprise. I know she's covered it with you in the last couple of meetings. And then we'll talk specifically about these areas where we would like to transfer some funds. As you probably figured out by looking at the document, there are 2 new reserve funds that we're looking to create, and there are 4 others which we are looking to further invest in. So, Mary Jane, floor is yours.
Okay, so as you can see from my memo, we are anticipating a surplus of $2.2 million. I will just state that that is an unaudited figure at this point. Anything could happen, although I don't expect it to. In order to keep that our undesignated fund balance at the same level that we have been in the last 2 years, per our policy, we need approximately $375,000 added into that fund. In addition, we are looking to keep the $250,000 that your board has put into the 2021 budget as a transfer from undesignated fund balance to help balance the budget. So we've included that to stay in there as well. So that leaves us approximately $1.5 million that we are able to allocate to other committed fund balances. And we have a list of 6 specific items that we're looking for your approval. So the first is committed to technology. We have a number of software enhancements and upgrades that we are looking to do. Among them are a requisition module through Munis. The Town Hall South is looking at a citizen self-service module through Munis. We are looking to do a digital budget book next year, which will enhance the way we do our capital budget. It was too quick for us to get it done for this capital budget season, but we're going to have it ready for next year. And our budget book that we bound at the end of each year will actually be done online. So we're looking forward to that. We have some significant website updates that we are looking to do. The website hasn't been redone for about 5 years or so, and Tracy's going to be working on that. We're looking also to implement automated timesheets to help with the payroll function, and a social media platform called Zen City. All of those items total over $130,000, but we're looking to put $100,000 away into the committed to technology line. Any questions on that one?
Yes, I have one question on the, when you said about the timesheet module, or how are the timesheets done now?
The payroll. Go ahead.
Through payroll, everything is done on paper. So everybody fills out a paper timesheet. They're put on a paper summary and photocopied and sent to payroll. So we're looking to just do.
You're looking to be more efficient?
No.
Wow. All right.
Well, you know.
All right. You got me on that one. But
All right, so
that's my only question. Go ahead, John.
just so I'm understanding this, we're going to take part of our $2.2 million surplus. We're going to take it out of our rainy day fund instead of returning it to taxpayers, and we're going to use it for new spending.
It's not technically unassigned fund balance. It's surplus, but it's not. We're not taking it out of any balance right now.
Well, I definitely can't support this. This money should go back to the taxpayers. This is just more spending, based on surpluses where they were axed from.
Understood. And, but we only got through one of the items. So, I mean, I think it's worth at least listening to the town and see what their requests are, because honestly, one of the questions I'm going to have is how are we going to spend, or how are we going to accommodate these requests later on in our budgets? Are we going to take the $1.5 million that we're considering here from the Board of Selectmen and from our finance director, and we're going to piece that off over 5 years and try to dedicate that to the budget, which will be trying to, well, we'll be putting that into our budget as opposed to trying to allocate it to things that we still need.
And then this is spending without approval of the taxpayers. There's no budget referendum. There's no chance for them to even have any say on this spending.
And I know we've had this discussion before, probably within the last year. So, and that discussion has simply been that either we need to spend it in a way that is effective now that we have, or we ask the taxpayers for it later. And it's a need anyway. And as leaders of this town, we have talked about this, numerous times, that when we have an opportunity to be able to take care of things that take them off of the taxpayers, it's still going to be taxpayer money. The question is whether we spend it now based on a surplus, or we try to fit into a budget where that's always a challenge to get a budget passed. So it's one, and we have opinions on that. And there's other questions that are going to come up, but I think we need to listen to each of the requests that are in front of us.
I mean, I feel like we're overtaxing the taxpayers by so much that we might not have even needed an increase for the last budget cycle. This is a lot of money. I mean, this is $2.2 million. And,
Well,
I feel like there's 600 or so that came in from our performance contracting. We're getting closer to $3 million of surplus.
Keep in mind, it's 1.5.
We're overtaxing the public.
Jonathan, let me correct you. The energy savings are not in this number. Those are being realized in the current fiscal year.
I know, but I don't agree that they should be. Those are savings from the prior year as well.
Well,
And this is surplus money that
whether you agree to it or not, those are the accounting principles that we have to adhere to.
We got through, so we have the technology line items. Second item, disaster relief.
As Matt alluded to earlier, we are not sure how much reimbursement we're going to receive through FEMA and the CARES Act. There are a number of small items that they are deeming ineligible that we had originally thought would be covered. It's both on at the moment, the reimbursement request we've made encompasses the town and the Board of Education, so this would be for both. So we're looking to put aside $150,000 to cover any of those items that may not be reimbursed that we have currently set aside as a receivable from FEMA and the CARES Act.
What's the accounting on that in terms of how much spent versus how much we're expected to possibly get back from, what is it, FEMA and CARES?
Yeah,
it's a gap.
well,
This is a gap amount, right? A gap allocation, so to speak.
what, the 150?
Yeah.
Yes, it's really a guess at this point. We put in approximately $300,000 for the first quarter of the COVID, which ended June 30. That included the town and the Board of Education. We have on the town side approximately another $40,000 for the first quarter of the new fiscal year. Not sure what we'll have from the Board of Ed because they've been receiving funding from other areas as well, but we'll be getting those numbers from Linda too. So those numbers are coming in, but I've been having a lot of meetings with the state and other finance directors throughout the entire state, and we've been finding that a lot of the items that we originally thought would be reimbursed may not be. So in anticipation of that inevitability, this is what this line item is for.
Okay. Codification.
That is planning and zoning. They've been doing the codification of their regulations, and George Crawl has requested an additional 50,000 to finish that project. That was not in our 5-year plan. So we've added it here.
Mary Jane, just let me follow up on that. This comprehensive work was originally funded in 2019-20 as a capital expenditure in the amount of 55,000. Unfortunately, it was not included in the capital for 2021, even though we knew it was going to exceed that 55,000. So it was an oversight on the part of planning and zoning relative to requesting that financing. So this will get us to the originally anticipated cost of about $100,000.
Okay, so this is money that has to be spent to finish the report.
Correct.
Just the codification for planning and zoning.
Yes.
Okay. Item number 4 that's listed here, road repair and sidewalks for 475.
We've been working with the town engineer on this line item and the next. We have a number of large projects that require a local match. We do use our LoSiP revenue for this particular type of match, but we are running up against not having enough money in our LoSiP account. So the 475 represents the Route 77 sidewalks, the Boston Street sidewalks, and the Sawmill Road Bridge, which is the town's portion, estimated portion of these projects. The first two that I mentioned, oh, never mind. Never mind. It's the next item. Next item, sorry.
Sorry,
I was
Mary,
going to say something for the next item.
Mary Jane, what's LoSiP?
Local capital improvement.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Local capital improvement funds that come in from the state. That comes in and it's dedicated to, it doesn't come in through the general fund, it's dedicated to local capital improvement programs, which is historically been used as the offset to our major road programs.
What projects have we used LoSiP for in the past, just for the boards? It just.
Oh, goodness, I'd have to go back in the records.
Almost any
project you can think of, some money from LoSiP goes, yeah.
And there's Mike, let me make a distinction. There's LoSiP and then there is LOTSIP. LoSiP is all state money. LOTSIP is federal money that is passed through the state, local transportation incentive program. And there are numerous projects. Those only go to what's known as feeder routes, like let's see, State Street, North State Street, the Nut Road, which is a pending project. Long Hill Road was a LOTSIP project, but LoSiP is the state administered portion. LOTSIP is the federal portion. Federal monies.
Okay.
And I'll move on to that's a great segue because the coastal resilience line items are specifically LOTSIP items. And with the LOTSIP program, they cover 100% of the construction, but the town has to cover 100% of the engineering and design. So the $525 represents the Falcon Road and the Chimney Road projects, which is the design services for those two projects, in anticipation of the LOTSIP money covering the entire construction.
Have we already gone out and gotten proposals for that, or is that an estimated amount from engineers?
That's the engineering bids from the engineering bids.
They are engineering bids.
Yes, they are.
All right. And various capital projects.
So the last one is really a way that we're looking to help this upcoming budget. We know we have a number of capital projects that are coming forward in the 5-year plan, and we really just thought that a couple $100,000 would really help us with this budget, because we anticipate that this is the budget that might be the hardest up and coming to balance. So that's what that line item is for.
Okay. Thank you for the recap. There were two things that immediately crossed my mind when I read these. And so I'll just state my thoughts first. One, these are all items that at some point we're going to have to spend. That's number one. Actually, I have more thoughts than two. Another one is that one of the things we read about that I started thinking about this is the turf field. And then after thinking about it, I immediately figured or thought that, any kind of designation or any kind of saving on this going towards the turf field wouldn't be prudent. I think that's something that we have to get taxpayers to provide input on, especially if it's going to be bonded. I'm also cognizant of the fact that we just heard from the Board of Education, and I may ask a further question of Linda, that in 3 months, we've already gotten COVID-related expenses of $800,000. But then as we were talking throughout this meeting, we understand that there's going to be a certain amount of grants that are going to offset that, which certainly does help. I don't remember the exact number in my head, but based on, Linda, what you said, was it between $500,000 and $600,000 worth of grant money that would offset the 800 at this time? The 800 is just the rolling total to now.
Right, it's somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000.
Okay. And the 800 accrued pretty quickly over 3 months. Do you have any idea of how much more it will grow at what rate? I know that's a kind of putting you on the spot, but I know it ramped up because of school, but do we expect that it's going to double? Do we expect that it's going to, it ramped up quick and then it's going to flatten out a little bit? We know salaries are going to, continue and while the school's in session, but supplies and a lot of other things that may have been brought up front might slow down a little bit. Just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, some of it should slow down once we get like all the dividers in place and we get all the equipment in place. There is some technology equipment that they're still working on getting. There is some, we're always going to need masks and gloves and those kind of things, cleaning supplies. Those are going to continue.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the bigger expenses should drop down a little bit and the salaries are going to ramp up more. You'll see more next month in some of the categories that haven't been filled in yet. So it's hard to predict at this point.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen within even the next few weeks.
Right.
With trying to reopen the high school in Adams.
Right. So I'm bringing this up because it is right now a surplus, but we also know that we have expenses that we don't even know where they're going to end up by June 30th, both on the town and the school side. The one last thing I will mention, and then I'll open it up to the board, is that a fund balance committed in any of these items, first of all, we've already created 4 of them. I believe 2 of them, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Jane or Matt, 2 of them would be new. Disaster relief and codification, right?
Correct.
Yes.
And disaster relief is a gap that we would have from expenses of COVID, or from COVID and from events, weather
And
events.
the
Storms.
storms that we know are
What
not.
we would get back.
Correct.
The other 4 are already created. And just to remind everybody, just because we take a certain amount of surplus and put it into a committed fund, unlike what we were just talking about with the OPEB trust, where once you put it in there, it's very difficult to take it out. We can commit money to these and basically, like a dedicated road fund, or put money in there And if we get if we go through the audit and we realize that we've got money sitting in a committed, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can take it and we choose, we could put it back into unassigned fund balance. We just uncommit it and put it in unassigned. So it's
You're
not that we have to spend the money, the full amount, no different than we have to spend the bonding that we approve every year. So this is just committing it to uses that would in the future need to be budgeted, whether it's one time or over 5 years or whatever ends up being. So I wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that also. Yes, it does seem like it's, quite a bit of transfers, but when you look at trying to put that into a budget, I remain skeptical that we're going to be able to get any of this done if we try to keep putting this into a budget when we have a surplus that we can actually commit it, use it if we need it, and if we don't need it, put it right back in the unassigned. And one last question, Matt or Mary Jane, on the committed fund balances that we already have created out of those 4, not just the 4 that are here out of the 6 that are already created. How many of those have balances in them that we haven't spent?
Technology has a small amount, coastal resistance.
Coastal resilience has about 200,000, nearly 100,000 of which is going to go for the replacement of the pedestrian bridge down in Chimney Corners and Sachem's Head. So that fund will be cut in half. The balance of that fund plus what we're asking for, we think will cover the engineering, our portion of the cost for Chimney Circles and Falcon Road.
And the balance that's in technology, we kind of already allocated it by reducing the amount of capital in the 21 budget by using the technology money. So we kind of already, the balance that's in there, we've kind of already committed it.
We did. What did we commit that for again?
I
remember the conversation.
Yeah.
To bring us up to 2017.
Yeah.
Maybe.
There's a large project for, I want to say 360 or 365, or I don't remember exactly what it is off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
It's Office 365.
Office 365. Yeah.
Is there anything in road repair and sidewalks?
Not in the general fund.
No. Okay. And various capital projects is basically just to help us out on capital projects.
Right.
Yeah, that's already established. It's just not funded.
Right. I would say, Mike, the least important or the most discretionary for what I would suggest your purposes is the fund balance committed to various capital projects. That just gives us the opportunity to diminish our capital request next year. That might not mean that we wouldn't come back asking for the same amount we had this year, because we were trying to keep it around $1 million. But it potentially allows us to get more done. And at the end of the day, I think that's what most of our taxpayers are looking for us to do, is to get things done in this community so that they continue to enjoy the services they have. And that's one way to do it. However, I will grant you that is of those 6 categories, that's the least important in terms of my considerations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I did a lot of talking. Open up to the board for any conversation.
I'll start. On the one hand, the amount that we're looking at is, it's a swing number. If you make a budget, you come out with, in this case, about 1 7/16% of the budget coming out, and this allocation would be that of surplus to be allocated. That in itself is not a big number. I understand Jonathan's point that if you return the money to the taxpayer and then the town disappears overnight, then they've got the money. But that's not really the point. The point is, if the taxpayer disappears, if he moves out of town, he's left money on the table. So I get that point. But in reality, we've just explained that the money needs to be spent. It doesn't have to be spent right away. It's capital spending. It's not more borrowing. And when I looked at it, I thought, do we have to do 1.5 out of 2.2 in a very uncertain world? Could we not knock this down 80% to 1.2 million? but listening, it sounds like it's all fairly well spent. I will mention in passing that Nut Plains Road repaving seems to be in the budget every year for the last few years, and it's not been done. So, I'd like to see little things like that not pass by, just say, put it in the budget, say we'll do it, not do it, and come back and ask for the same money again. But unless somebody wants to join me in knocking this down a little bit, I'm in favor of it.
I would definitely join you on knocking it down, Bob. I don't think we should be spending this money. I hope
It's
some of
just
my
a very
fellow
uncertain
board
time.
members, and I hope some of the taxpayers see this for what it is. We're engaging in a pattern of overtaxing.
I don't think so. I don't agree with that.
Well, Bob,
I think it's good value for money, but I just think that
let me say my
concerned
piece,
about
Bob.
the unseen.
I want to explain what I see here, what I believe I see here. I see a town that's generating millions of dollars of surpluses year after year and generating millions of dollars of surpluses in its medical account. And then what I see is this body, along with the Board of Selectmen, pulling those surpluses and using them for spending. This is at a level and a magnitude where we could have avoided a tax increase completely last year.
Well, then that begs the question, would you rather see
Is that
that
fair?
run
That fair?
deficits? Would you rather it turn in a deficit every year? It's only 1% or 2%.
Between this $2.2 million surplus and some of this money that we're finally seeing realized this year from the energy savings, we didn't even need a tax increase last year. That's not significant. That's not material.
Did you see it coming? I mean, expenses are down because of COVID. A lot of things are down. The world has changed.
That we're being too conservative in our budgeting, and we shouldn't be running these surpluses. And then with the board to say in one breath that, hey, we may run deficits, and the solution is to take a surplus that would, under normal circumstances, just roll into the undesignated rainy day fund and spend it on new spending. How is that the solution to a fearful budget year? I just can't get on board. And it's become a pattern. I mean, we're taking money out of the medical surplus. We're taking money out of surpluses from each tax year, and we're using it for spending. And then this goes around our process. The taxpayer never has an ability to vote on it, to say that I approve that. And given
It's all spending bad.
Given that they may very well do that, but we are circumventing the process and just saying, yeah, we're going to spend it on these objectives. It's not part of any budget. It's not part of any budget referendum.
Let me just throw a question out. Let me throw a question out real quick. If we have a policy that this board has adhered to since my beginnings on the board, my early beginnings of getting to a 10% unassigned fund balance, we get that with the 375. We took 250 of it out to mitigate a tax increase this past year. So if we were to take all of this or additional monies and put them into unassigned, do we want to be at a 13% unassigned fund balance and not spend it?
No, that would again be an overtaxation of the public. We'd have a undesignated balance, a rainy day fund that's too excessive. In my opinion.
Jonathan, you have continually said you want to return it to the taxpayers. So if you were to take that $1.5 million and apply it to next year's budget, what would you do in the subsequent year to find that same $1.5 million to balance the budget? Where would you get the next round of $1.5 million?
If we couldn't find it, we would have to increase taxes. But if our budget is balanced, we don't need to increase.
You would be willing to basically double.
I think taxpayers could take a year off from increases.
I just want you on record. You'd be willing to do that.
If we ran the deficit and the spending was necessary and we couldn't tighten our belt, then yes, we would look to the taxpayer for an increase. We've been doing that year after year.
And you would support it? You would vote in favor of it on a Board of Finance meeting of a 4% or 4 or 5% tax increase?
It would depend if I thought the spending was irresponsible.
That doesn't work, Jonathan. That doesn't work.
So wait a minute. Do you think that the spending that's on here listed that would be committed to use for these particular purposes is not needed or is.
Was it part of our original budget? Was it approved
Not
from?
part of our original budget, but it will be.
Was it part of our original budget? Can we get an honest answer on that?
No, I just said no. It's not part
Okay.
of our original budget,
All right.
but it will be.
Is it necessary? I don't find it necessary. I don't find it necessary, and especially in the climate we're in right now.
Okay,
I
so
think
John,
in the very
John-
meeting,
I guess the question is, when's the right time? That's all.
Jonathan, what you just said is Falcon Road, Sawmill River Bridge, the sidewalks on 77, the sidewalks on Boston Street are not necessary, correct? Did I hear you
They-
correctly? Did I
They
hear you
are
correctly?
not necessary in this budget cycle. That is correct. In my opinion, I am one voice.
Right. And there is $1 million in road repair and sidewalks.
If they were so necessary, why weren't they
Excuse me.
insisted upon being in our budget this year? If they were so urgent that we couldn't live without them, why didn't we keep them in the budget?
Take a look at your 5-year capital plan. They're all there, Jonathan. Most of them are there.
Right, but we're not planning on doing it this year.
We have
Why
an
not? If it was
opportunity.
so urgent and we have to do it this year, why wasn't it in the original budget?
Because we have the
Opportunity.
opportunity to do it. That's why.
Well, you've got an opportunity to take away this surplus, but this
We
is a
wouldn't
bad.
be bonding them. That's the difference. We
Thank you.
have the money. If we're in the capital plan that they're in, we would be bonding them.
But we have the
This is an
money. because
opportunity to
we're
not
overtaxing
bond them.
taxpayers.
Wait a minute, say that again, John. If you
Yes,
have-
just a matter. Jonathan, I think it's just really timing. So if we don't do it now, we're just going to bond it later.
What we've been doing this year after year, $1 million surplus. Another million comes out of the medical fund because
this is
that's
all-
overfunded.
Correct me if I'm wrong, this is only the second year that we have done this. We have not committed anything from a surplus. In the years I've been on here, we did it last year and we're doing it this year. We haven't done it more than twice. This is the second time. And we're at a position that we could do it that we've been yearning to get to for many, many years. We have a
This
health.
is a wrong pattern to be in, to overtax and then take the money and spend it without even having any kind of approval from the taxpayer.
Would the taxpayers know what they're voting for?
Jonathan, the term over.
Taxpayers in our budget process have an opportunity to have a budget referendum. How can they have a budget referendum when we take the surplus and we decide to use it for expenditures? Does that not circumvent our charter?
No, it does not. This is fully allowable by the charter. Jonathan, you are an elected official. You are empowered to make some decisions, some spending decisions outside of the normal budget referendum process. Those are statutorily allocated rights. If you don't want to exercise those, that's your choice.
I would exercise giving the surplus back to the taxpayers. We're overtaxing the taxpayers.
Take the
And then
bait
we're
on.
spending on expenditures that are not approved in the budget process. That's the pattern. That's what's happened in the last 2 years.
And by the way, I want to congratulate the Board of Finance on having created some of those surpluses and leading to the creation of those surpluses. It was conservative budgeting practices relative to revenue estimates, given the uncertainties of state funding that have largely put us in this position. So I do want to congratulate the Board of Finance on having been prudent in their budgeting decisions to create these surpluses.
Overly prudent, in my opinion.
It's your opinion. It's okay.
Matt, I'll just add that my sense of knocking this down a bit was because I felt that some of the expenditures were lower because of COVID.
Yeah.
Not that, and I'm still back on the uncertainty thing.
Right.
But your point is well taken.
Bob, again, in the spirit of compromise, take the $200,000 off for committed to various capital projects. However, here's my only concern. I don't necessarily like the idea of us potentially going back and taking something out of the audited unallocated fund balance. The financial markets look differently at when you dip into it. If you've already set up reserves for certain type of events, they look at that very favorably because they know that going forward, you've built yourself a firewall. However, in the interest of compromise, that 200,000 was a placeholder.
I'm a big fan of capital spending instead of, I am.
Yep.
But as I said, my remarks were, when I saw this without the explanation, if the 375,000 takes us to a 10% rainy day fund, then, the rest is just money that we're setting aside that we won't have. It will be part of this year's budget that will be crafted in the spring. And, I think Mrs. Scanlon said it's kind of a timing thing either. And Mrs. Wallace said, we've got the money now rather than bond for it. So it's all understood. And some of this is semantics and most of it is timing. The concern I voice is simply that we really are still in a bad place in predicting the future.
Right.
Anyway,
Matt, I appreciate the various capital projects, your comments on that and willingness to let that go. Obviously, let it go for now. It's not going to go forever. My biggest concern is what's going to happen near the end of the year with both the Board of Education and the town regarding what we're going to need when we've already seen expenditures that the town and the Board of Ed are both accruing, getting grant money from, but there's going to be an amount we're not going to get. And if we're right at that number of keeping the unassigned fund balance at our 10% number, and we take the 250 out, which we've already basically used, for mitigation of taxes for last year. I don't know. Are we going to need $250,000? Are we going to need $500,000 to offset? Are we going to need $1 million? That's my only concern, but my concern is not at all on any of the expenses here. If I were to do anything, I would probably agree with the various capital projects being removed and do 1.3 and go right through technology, disaster relief, codification, road repair, coastal resilience. There's not anything there that is not going to be going directly to the taxpayers in some way, shape, or form. Various capital projects would too, but I think it's like you said, it's a placeholder. It's something that I think we'll just have to take a chance with until next year. That, again, that's my opinion, where I would go with it. But I would be willing to do the 1.3. Anybody else?
I've been consistent with my concerns about what's coming down the road with regard to the virus and what we're going to need to spend. And the numbers that we've seen so far are a start, and hopefully on the school side, they represent capital investment for materials and supplies that are going to not need to be duplicated at the same rate that they have been initially. But we don't know what's coming through the winter and into next spring. And it was a concern I had in looking at this initially to say, I'd rather leave that money available to us so that if we need to dip into it to cover some of these costs that we're not going to get reimbursed from either the state or the federal government, that we'd have the money available to us without having to go to the taxpayer next year and increase the taxes higher than we did this past year to cover these expenses that we might be incurring. That said, we have set aside $250,000 in this budget that we adopted in the spring to keep the increase in the taxes lower than it might have been. We're continuing to fund out of the surplus the undesignated fund balance or the unassigned fund balance at a level that's in compliance with our auditors. I think taking the $200,000 out of the various capital projects, although I'm sure they would be spent wisely, probably makes sense under the circumstances. And I agree that the capital items that are listed otherwise in here are things that we're eventually going to need to pay for and improve anyhow. Chimney Corner Circle and Falcon Road need to be repaired. It's not just a question of adapting to the changing environment, but it's making sure that we can get emergency services down there when they need to in the time of an emergency. The codification project is already underway and needs to be completed. The road repair and sidewalks, particularly if it's along Route 77, is money well spent to make those roads safer. There are a fair number of people who walk up and down that area that need to be protected in an area where it's heavily traveled. I hate to admit it, but most people don't necessarily obey the posted speed limit. And so, initially I shared Bob's perspective that these numbers seem to be higher than I would have thought, but at the same time, the services or the use that the funds are being put to are for the benefit of the taxpayers and are doing it at a rate where we're not going out to borrow the money to get them completed. So with that adjustment, I think I could support these proposed transfers.
Anybody else? So what I think I would like to do, there were two ways I was thinking about doing this, is whether or not to entertain a motion for all of them or separate. I think that based on the discussion I'm hearing, I'm going to take each one separately for vote. So with that, just bear with me because I'll just race through these and hopefully get it right on the stating of the motions. So in relation to the first one, I would make a motion or entertain a motion to transfer $100,000 from the unaudited surplus to a fund balance committed to technology.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to do roll call because I have always gone from sitting at the table from my right to my left. I'm going to switch it now. So I'm going to go through roll call. Bob Hartmann.
Aye.
Jonathan Trotta.
Opposed.
Jeff Beatty.
Aye.
Mike Ailes. Aye. Ken Gammerman.
Aye.
Veronica Wallace.
Aye.
Megan Scanlon. Okay. Second motion, motion to, or entertain a motion to transfer $150,000 from the unaudited surplus to fund balance committed to disaster relief.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote. Bob Hartmann.
Aye.
Jonathan Trotta.
Opposed.
Jeff Beatty.
Aye.
Mike Ailes. Aye. Ken Gammerman.
Aye.
Veronica Wallace.
Aye.
Megan Scanlon.
Aye.
Next motion, we'll entertain a motion to transfer $50,000 from the unaudited surplus to a fund balance committed to codification.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, Bob Hartmann,
Aye.
Jonathan Trotta,
Opposed.
Jeff Beatty,
Aye.
Mike Ailes. Aye. Ken Gammerman,
Aye.
Veronica Wallace,
Aye.
Megan Scanlon.
Aye.
Next one, entertain a motion to transfer $475,000 from unaudited surplus to a fund balance committed to road repair and sidewalks.
So moved.
Second.
Call the vote. Bob Hartmann,
Aye.
Jonathan Trotta,
Opposed.
Jeff Beatty,
Aye.
Mike Ailes. Aye. Ken Gammerman,
Aye.
Veronica Wallace,
Aye.
Megan Scanlon.
Aye.
Okay. As my shuts off on me, now I got to read it again. Entertain a motion to transfer $525,000 from unaudited surplus to a fund balance committed to coastal resilience.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote. Bob Hartmann,
Aye.
Jonathan Trotta,
Opposed.
Jeff Beatty,
Aye.
Mike Ailes. Aye. Ken Gammerman,
Aye.
Veronica Wallace,
Aye.
Megan Scanlon.
Aye.
Okay, and the final one, entertain a motion to transfer $200,000 from an unaudited surplus to fund balance committed to various capital projects.
So moved.
Second,
I'll call the vote. Bob Hartmann,
No.
Jonathan Trotta,
Opposed.
Jeff Beatty,
No.
Mike Ailes, opposed. Ken Gammerman,
opposed.
Veronica Wallace,
No.
and Megan Scanlon.
Opposed.
Okay. Okay, got through that. I do want to thank you for the time. You know, the one thing I don't think was mentioned, what was the Board of Selectmen's vote on all these this morning? Oh, you're on mute, Matt.
They voted unanimously for all of them.
They did, okay. Okay,
There goes the boat. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
At
least-
I was just gonna say thank you for the descriptions and your thoughtfulness on this. You know, it's always an interesting discussion how to use this, but I think it's a very smart and wise move and very prudent. I think we're going to continue to be in good shape financially in this town. So I have no issues with any of the actions we took tonight or with the Board of Selectmen. So I congratulate you on that.
I want to thank the Board of Finance for an honest and earnest discussion about it. We think this town has certain needs, and we're trying to do the best that we can to mitigate the impact of taxpayers when we have the opportunities to do so. And I think you guys have just demonstrated a commitment to do the same thing. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. We have nothing further on item number 9. We've taken care of everything. Thank you again. Committee reports. And number 10, building permits. Anything on building permits? Item number 11, old business. Anything covered under old business? Number 12, new business.
One quick thing,
Mary Jane?
I just want to report that capital budgets are out to department heads, and we'll be scheduling those meetings for sometime in November.
I'm assuming they will be Zoom.
You assume correctly.
I'm sure I did. Okay. The one thing, actually very quickly, new business, we already brought it up, but I do encourage everybody on the board Wednesday night, if you can, to try to listen in on the public hearing, the workshop about the budget that the Board of Ed's having. It'll be interesting to see what they're going to say this year, the public that is, with everything that's been going on. Sometimes it's not a lot of input, but I would imagine this year there might be some concerns. I don't know what those are. I'm not at all predicting, but I am looking forward to seeing what the public input is on the budget for coming year. This is basically the first date that the Board of Ed has to really start shaping the budget publicly. So item number 13, public forum. I don't see any except for us.
We'll go to bed.
I could just add one thing, just because it'll be before our next meeting. I'd like to encourage everybody out there to go out and vote, because there's going to be an election between tonight and the next time we get together. So please make sure you go out and find some way to cast your ballot.
Thank you, Jeff.
As often as you can.
Easy. All right. With that, thank you, everyone. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in
Thanks.
favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night, everybody.
Happy
Thank you.
Halloween.
Good night.
Talk to you later.